I have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're going to pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting me wouldn't have lasted long.
Hello there.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
Talking High Republic today on the heels of The Acolyte, we aren't slowing down on this era of Star Wars. During The Acolyte, the publishing wing of Star Wars sent us copies of their latest novel, Temptation of the Force, the 7th adult novel in the multimedia High Republic series. So we get to sit down and revisit some of our favorite characters, some fan favorite characters like Belzetafar, Elzar Mann, Avar Kriss, even young Vernestra Rwoh in this story. And having waited to talk about this story since The Acolyte came out, there's going to be a lot of interesting conversations surrounding Vernestra's character. There's lots of exciting developments inside and outside of the Occlusion Zone as the Jedi grapple with this conflict that they insist is not a war, because you got to make sure that the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones lines make sense. And if you're new to our show, then you're in for a treat. We cover a lot of these Star Wars books. This is the latest one. And my name is Carter. I'm the host of these Star Wars breakdowns, reviews, and histories. This is the Star Wars Station, and if you're a YouTube listener, you're probably seeing something brand new. This is our very first episode with a dynamic animation for our episodes. Audio listeners, it may be worth checking out the new YouTube just to see this awesome new animation. It took us a while to get this just right, and so we're super proud to have our RPG characters mimicking our speech with their movements. We do an actual play live RPG, if you didn't know, over on our Patreon, and this is just a little bit of that bleeding over. Compliments to our artist Kaylee for these awesome art assets, and I keep saying "our" because it's not just me on this show, but my longtime co-host, the spying Santeca himself, Colin Archer.
Hey, Carter, man, we're spoiled with all these books. Not only do we get them to read, we get them on audiobook narrated by Mark Thompson, and they're fantastic. This one feels a lot different than some of the others, but I'm excited to talk about it, and I'm glad we're able to come together on this thing and get into the details on it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hop in and talk about this book. It's the same setup for all of our audio recordings, for all of our book reviews, is that Colin listened to it, I read it, so we've got the two perspectives. Obviously, audiobook, fully produced, as you said, done by our dear friend Mark Thompson. And then on the page, flipping through, seeing the way the paragraphs break up. It's a slightly different experience, but we don't discount either experience.
It's way different. Since I listen to an audiobook, I can cruise through these things at double speed.
Right.
I listen to them while I'm driving for a job I do, and it's just crazy.
Yeah. So you move through them really quickly, and then we both are going to have just a slightly colored perspective, because these books, they reference music a lot in them. And so even it's fully produced with Star Wars music, but there's also a few times in the production where they're including more unique tracks when they're talking about how Avar Kriss experiences the Force. And so when I'm reading the pages, I'm imagining this, but you're experiencing it as it's happening.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
So this book opens with a prologue, as all of these books do. This one about our basically both of our favorite character in the High
Porter
Republic.
Engle.
Yes, exactly. Porter Engle is damaged and is pursuing a dangerous path. So we left him off in the last book where he had just narrowly escaped a massive ship explosion. He and his nemesis, General Weiss, were the only two survivors from that.
And they're both these long-lived persons, hundreds of years old.
Yes.
So they got this feud going on.
Long-standing beef between these two. And this story, it's interesting to me. So this is a multimedia project, obviously. We've said that already. They have books, young adult novels, comics, audio dramas, the whole gamut of stuff. And what's most interesting to me is that a big chunk of this book is devoted to Porter's pursuit of Weiss for a much longer vendetta than has been established in this trilogy or in the Phase 1 trilogy. It goes to the Phase 2 initiative in a comic book. And that's where the source comes from. So if you've read that comic, it's called The Blade. We've both read it. It enriches this experience a lot more, knowing that that's the source of this conflict.
It really does. It's cool.
So Porter is kind of on a dangerous path. He's really focused on just pursuing General Weiss. And he meets a character named Ker Santeca, who's caring for him, and Porter immediately thrashes awake. He's in an unknown location. He's being cared for by an unknown person in the middle of Nihil territory, in the middle of what's called the Occlusion Zone, which is, you want to explain the Occlusion Zone?
Yeah. For the easiest reference is Space North Korea.
Mm-hmm,
you can't go there, not easily. You can't get out once you go. and basically the bad guys, the Nihil and their leader, what's his name? Martian Rowe. I think maraschino cherries for some reason. I think of that every time.
So we say Martian, but I think
It's
that
Markion.
everyone's been updated to say Markion. So in the first three, it was back and forth.
Yeah.
Now I think it's standardized Markion.
Markion, yeah.
I like Martian better, so
Yeah.
I keep saying Martian.
Anyway, he's the leader, and he's crazy.
He's a good villain.
He's a good villain. He really is, and he's basically got an iron grip on the zone of space. It's some technologically operated where the Republic or anybody who tries to cross into this occlusion zone, their ships just blow up.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's like hitting a physical wall.
Yeah, and unless you have the proper hyperspace codes, ships can't travel through hyperspace. And in the Star Wars universe, if you're not traveling through hyperspace, it operates the same as their own universe. Traveling intraplanetary is fine, but traveling intraplanetary across the stars takes thousands of years.
Yeah, they'd have to have generation ships to get through the occlusion zone.
So with hyperspace is obviously the only way to travel, not warp speed, not anything else. But it's hyperspace is much faster, and you can't do that in this occlusion zone without the blessing of the Nihil.
Right.
And it's as they would with any schizoid regime. It's just up to their whim at any given moment what they want to do. They could come hijack your ship to turn into a bomb. They could, so trade amongst these. It's just this is another reason it's not just shut off like North Korea. It's like there's no trade in between these planets that previously existed. So people are feeling a huge brunt of like lack of goods and services.
Absolutely. Well, it's just like in our own world, we can't grow avocados in the United States. There's nowhere to grow a banana. Well, I guess you can grow bananas
not at
in the United
scale,
States, but not at, exactly. Yeah, someone can have an avocado tree in their backyard, but you can't grow avocados at scale. So we trade with Mexico for our avocados, and so
comparative advantage is what that's called.
Yeah. So imagine there's 33% of the world that we can't get whatever resource from. I mean, we literally can't even grow coffee beans in the United States, except I think Hawaii. And so there's just no coffee, which is in most Americans' diet every day.
Yeah. It would be if you Thanos snap coffee out of people's existence, thousands of people would die. It would not be a good thing. It sounds silly to say, but think back to COVID-19 and all kinds of numbers went crazy. And there was not a resource gone except for, or there was a lot actually, but nothing crazy. Toilet paper.
Yeah.
But really the supply chain, yada, yada. I'm not an economist. I think you have an actual degree in that, but
yes. Yeah.
Regardless, when something is gone like this, that's important. I mean, we're talking about food staples. There are people starving
isn't just
in this
coffee.
occlusion
This
zone.
is exactly like in the Eye of Darkness book. There's a whole plot point about shipping grain between planets.
Yeah, it's in this one too. Yeah, the Republic is mainly a humanitarian effort thing in this book because they figured out a way to penetrate this occlusion zone.
Right. So that is what the occlusion zone is, protected by the Stormwall, as Colin said, and so Porter Engle finds himself on the Nihil side of this in the not Jedi and the not Republic side. So his resources are very limited. We know just recently the first two Jedi have been able to break out of the occlusion zone. Vernestra Rwoh and Avar Kriss using two different methods. And so in this prologue, Porter wakes up in the occlusion zone, is reasonably wary of the person taking care of him, despite us knowing and Porter not realizing that this guy's a good guy. But through the course of the conversation, the character, Ker Santeka, can say, I can recognize a Jedi even without the robes. And that takes a little bit of talent, but it really is more saying what it means to be a Jedi, and that a Jedi is not made out of their robes. Like, you would be able to tell Porter Engle is a Jedi by his bearing alone. I don't think this is a talent of Ker Santeka I think this is more saying that the Jedi are so recognizable, but through their behavior.
Especially Porter Engle. He's like the perfect embodiment, almost. You know, he's so long-lived and has done so many things. And he's such a well-written character that it's easy to believe what this character's saying.
Right. It is. So Porter leaves Care Santeca and goes off to continue his pursuit of General Weiss, which is just a central plot line throughout this book. And will probably be in the next one based on results from this.
It's a good place to start this because there was kind of a cliffhanger in the last book.
Yes.
Whether he lived or not.
It is. Each one of these books ends on a cliffhanger. This one ends on a big one. This one ends on a cool cliffhanger.
Yeah,
I can't wait to get to that part. So we then go to Coruscant for chapter 1, where we're with Avar and Elzar Mann. And so we have a couple videos. Like I said, we've done a bunch of recordings on these books, and we've done another recording specifically on any of the books we missed, where we're just kind of doing a High Republic catch-up. So we are going to give some briefs in this, like talking about the Occlusion Zone, but there's a bunch of other stuff that we just can't. It's already been. This is the 7th book in just the adult novels. This is more than the teens in books if you count comics and you count the young adult novels. Yeah. And so we're not going to be covering every relationship and every character. So that's just a fair warning to everybody to go check out our other podcasts on this subject if we say something that you don't recognize. So chapter 1 opens with Avar, Chris, and Elzar Mann, two of like the best Jedi and central characters for this part of the story. And they're still mourning the death of their friend Stellan Gios, who was like the third member of their Three Musketeers. And it's been a year. We know that this book, the chapter 1, opens on the year anniversary of Stellan dying, because that's the year anniversary of Starlight Beacon falling.
Yeah, crazy.
And so Starlight Beacon was a ship that the Republic had put out in the middle of
space station.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, space station out in the middle of the Outer Rim as like a beacon of light, because this is a much less settled galaxy than we get during the prequels.
Yeah, there's some wild frontier.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. So amidst all of this conflict, Avar and Elzar have still not let go of Stellan. They still haven't really forgotten him, and it's still his death has scarred them, probably for the rest of their lives.
What I took from these scenes is these people, and you could say for a lot of Jedi, but I think these characters especially, you know, they were like raised as younglings together, and passed the trials, did all these things, gone on all these adventures, and so they were so attuned and aligned with each other that having Stellan Gios be gone is lopping your arm off or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you're gonna. I have no idea what missing a limb is like, but I'm sure you go to reach for something and it's not there.
Right. You know,
same thing. You're reaching out for this person emotionally. You know, like I think they describe it. It's hard. I can't remember specific instances in this book, but it's like you get back to the temple and you're expecting your friend to be out there to greet you. He's not there.
Exactly.
Your mind gets in these. Your mind gets in these grooves of what it's like to be, and it's when that person's not there to greet you, it's yanked out of that groove. It's a jarring feeling. This
is a really big look into the found family aspect of Star Wars from a different lens. I mean, in Star Wars, you have a lot of examples of this where, you know, you could be like Luke, literally finding family through Leia, who is just blood relative that you didn't know. You could have like the Rebels crew, where they're every example of a family that you can think of, but none of them are blood related. None of them are, only 2 or 3 of them are even the same species. And this is another version of that, where the Jedi are taken from their blood family as children. And so they develop this familial connection with each other. And that's Avar, Elzar, and Stellan are, you know, 3 siblings. Well, not siblings, but
yeah. And it's something more because of the Force. Some sort of attunement there is impactful.
Yep. Another thing I want to note about chapter 1, Avar mentions experimental uses of the Force. And we got a little touch of that when she was stuck in the Occlusion Zone in the last book, with Elzar trying all kinds of means to contact her. Super cool stuff. I was really into that. I was sad we didn't get any more of that.
I love this stuff because this is what, for me, this fantasy world escapism is. And it seems to be true, especially, you know, it's hard to discern in the movies. We've talked about this a bunch, but like in this trilogy, or in the Phase 1, Avar Chris basically does summons the Force across the whole sector to turn a starship, and that's something akin to what she's talking about here. The next thing I think of is the thought bomb in the Bane books.
Yeah. Yes.
And so there's all these there's all these arcane knowledge or deep knowledge or stuff that was discovered and too dangerous to even touch.
Mm-hmm.
And so it opens us up for interpretation of what, like, if I were a Force user, what could I discover? You know,
right,
what
exactly.
would I want to do?
Like Elzar's trying to contact Avar across
Out of
planets.
desperation.
Yeah, across the whole galaxy. And he's looking for technological means, force means, all kinds of stuff. And like you said, literature's really good at getting this across, because we get a little bit of it in the original trilogy where Luke and Vader are having their scene switch back, talk to each other at the end of episode 5, where they're communing through the Force. And then you have a little bit of this in the sequels when Rey and Kylo have their Force dyad that's allowing them to have a lightsaber fight through this like not different dimensions, but different
across this galaxy,
across the galaxy, right? And Luke doing that in The Last Jedi, but it's just so easier to get those concepts across in literature, and the things that we're seeing visually, there's a lot more happening subtly with the Force that just cannot be explained on screen. And so they do a really good job, all of that. So we keep moving through the book, and all of the beginning chapters, just like in any book that especially is a part of a series, is a check-in. Every chapter is just, here's this character and what they're at, where they're at, what they're thinking. So we get to Marchion next, and he's the dog that caught the car. In this book, in the book previous, the Nihil only thrive as basically an opposition party. They only thrive outside power. Like there's arguments all the time in different political spheres in the real world where it's like, well, this political party, especially in parliamentary systems, only exists as opposition. Like, if they ever come into power, the government falls apart. Like, they immediately have to call a re-election because they only exist to be opposition. They raise money being opposition. They don't raise money being in power. And Marchion is like that. He personally, the Nihil are like that. Another character, Girastaros, has a vision to turn them not into that, to turn them into just a bona fide government.
Entity, yeah.
But Marchion could care less. I mean, he is basically depressed at the beginning of this book, because he just has nothing to do. He has accomplished his goal, and now he's, that has nothing. And he finds his motivation later on in the book. It's a very, very dark motivation.
It's crazy,
but
how he
super cool.
It, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's
It's probably my favorite of the plot lines throughout the book is Marchion and discovering what he discovers.
Yeah. See, I didn't like that plot line. I was used to the Marchion that was gallivanting around doing mean stuff.
Sure.
He does a little bit of mean things, and I guess it ends that way. But
well, see, I think that's what is setting up for 3 is he's going to do some pretty terrible stuff.
You're right. I'm being too cynical, but watching somebody be depressed and sad is depressing and sad.
Sure, yeah, but that's what I liked about it because I understand they do a really good job of getting to the core of Marchion's character, and that he thrives with these experiments, as he calls them. He thrives with this discovering new things and weaponizing them. And he thrives. He says so much as himself that he thrives when he has the ability to find new ways to instill fear. Yeah. And that's why he's been so depressed, is because he's the dog that caught the car. He's done it. Yeah. And so now this is a new way, and a new way to expand his power. I
wish they got to it sooner, I guess. But whatever.
Yeah, I understand.
Silly criticism, splitting hairs, but yeah.
So we continue through this chapter, and we learn that Marchion's growing false kyber crystals for an as of yet unknown goal. It's made to explain later that that's how the Stormwall is powered, is through the use of kyber.
Very cool thing.
But false kyber crystals are the same as, if you have a false diamond, it's not as strong as a real diamond in the real world. False kyber crystals break all the time.
Yeah, they get consumed.
Yep.
And in this case, is it in this chapter where they're being blighted, right?
Yes. He goes to this planet and learns that there's this disease that looks a lot like what the levelers do to the Jedi by turning them to dust and husking them, happening to organic and inorganic matter alike.
Now, he even throws somebody into it.
Yeah, throws a cat and a person into it, and sees that. And this is where the mystery starts. Is right at this very beginning, we don't know anything about it. It's called the Blight, and it's just like, what's going on?
Yeah, big question marks.
We also learn that Marchion has to deal with the specter of his ancestor, Marta Rowe, during this.
Yeah, was that confirmed it was her?
Yeah, I mean, great-great-grandmother
that's
holding
just
flowers,
insightful?
has the lines on her
Okay.
forehead.
Yeah,
I mean, they do everything but say her name.
It never right out says, but yeah, Marta Rose phase 2.
Right.
And she is basically, they didn't call themselves the Nihil in phase 2, but all the fingerprints were there.
Yeah. She's part of an organization called the Path of the Open Hand. They oppose the Jedi for completely different reasons than the Nihil. They think the Jedi abused the Force just through the use of it. And Marta is an average, regular person, an Everini, just like Marchion is. And she, by the end of the book, leaves on the Gaze Electric. It's her ship originally. And she's not, at the end of phase 2, like completely broken in the head, but something's wrong. And she's discovered these levelers. And we don't know really for the Rowe family line, because it says she's his great-great-grandmother. And so we don't know what happens between then and there, where the family just completely goes off the rails. And so that's what we likely will learn in the final book.
There's the Everini is a persecuted species, probably for good reasons.
Right.
Because in the phase 2 books, it talks about how everywhere we go, people hate us.
Mm-hmm.
And for all we know, Marchion Rowe's inbred.
Right.
Right. And that leads generations down the line. It leads to a lot of problems.
Yeah, because it's interesting because we never see in the phase 2 books any male Everini.
Yeah.
But
we know he had a dad.
Exactly. We know his father. His father, not Alistair, starts with an A. Anyways, yeah, he has a father. But he's full blood Everini. I mean, it says as much multiple times. And so it is interesting that we don't ever see.
And Marta Rowe, all she had was her sister.
Right.
And so they had to find some other Everini, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So we get to the 3rd chapter. We get with Avar again, who's on a mission to bring refugees back from the Occlusion Zone. We learn she's been running these missions for weeks now, and that only a few select Jedi are allowed to jump in and out of the Occlusion Zone because it's still relatively dangerous. They figured out how to do it on a small scale, but it's still a problem. It's still not great. So you
have to have some special skill in the Force to be able to do this.
Yes,
not just your casual Jedis. Oh yeah, let's hyperspace across over here.
Right, exactly. They're using something called a Sunveil device developed by a girl named Avon Sunveil, who we learn a little bit more about during this story. So she's relieving refugees from Naboo. We learn that one of them is a Santeca. There's a couple. So the last name Staros comes up a bunch during the High Republic books, and the last name Santeca does. And so for pretty dedicated Star Wars fans, you'll recognize Lor Santeca, character from The Force Awakens, a friend to Luke Skywalker, and Sana Staros from the Star Wars comic books, Han Solo's ex-wife, or ostensible ex-wife. And so they do a good job about bringing in these lesser-known characters, making the galaxy feel, connected, but not using the last name Jin. Oh, this is Qui-Gon Jinn's grandpa or something like that. Like that's too heavy-handed, but they take obscure enough side characters and weave their stories into this.
Yeah.
And so Avar is also reunited with Belen and Riel, who are like not characters in this book. They were a massive part of the first book, and then are essentially only around for, if this were a movie, scenes, like 1 or 2 scenes total. And like most of them are just through a comm where you just it's like there's a recording of them somewhere, and so it's like they couldn't get the actor to come back on screen, and he just recorded some voice lines one afternoon for it. But anyway, Belen, the Ugnaught pilot that carries grain, and then Riel Dairo, who was a central figure also of the Phase 1 books, a HoloNet news broadcaster who is in the Occlusion Zone and is doing some, propaganda.
She was captured.
Work.
She was captured and doing secret transmissions outside of the Occlusion Zone. To inside and outside. Well, I don't know if outside. Might be remiss remembering that. But she was given like messages of hope, piggybacking onto anything and everything she could.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So Belen and Riel and Care Santeca from the prologue petition Avar to record what they're calling morale drops, and just words of hope, like you said, in the Occlusion Zone specifically. And Avar agrees. And then we also learned throughout this scene that Care Santeca has a contact in the Nihil. That's been feeding them the ways to get through the path. They just feed them the path codes needed to get in and out of the Occlusion Zone. So then we cut to one of your favorite characters, Bel Zettifar, and Buryaga. And we get to see a really special friendship of theirs, not often seen in the Jedi. It's not even like there's a difference there's obviously a different kind of friendship, and I think most people listening to this with friends will understand this, that you have Avar, Elzar, and Stellan. Like, a trio of friendship has a completely different dynamic than people who are friends one-on-one. And so Bell and Burryaga are kind of showcasing this really special Jedi friendship one-on-one that we haven't really seen before, because they're the same rank. They're the same, they're peers.
Jedi Knights. Yeah.
It's like we see Obi-Wan and Anakin as friends, but they're not peers. They are peers here, Burryaga and Bell. And so they have a really neat friendship throughout this book and throughout the series so
Very
far.
Cool.
So they're on Oanne, Oanne. I don't know. How does the audiobook say it? Do you remember?
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I couldn't figure it out reading it. I was like, anyways, Oanne. And there's this species called the Elia-On, which are, the way the book describes them, basically short Wookiees. They're like Ewoks, kind of, but they speak a dialect of Shirawook. And the Jedi are trying to convince them to leave their homeworld before the Occlusion Zone expands. But they're not able to leave their homeworld because they're like fundamentally tied to the forest.
Yeah,
real Wookiee
it
style.
makes it sound like they would die. Like they had this symbiotic relationship with the trees there.
Right.
And
right.
they if they didn't die fast, it'd be soon after.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we see this story, and through the Eye of Darkness, Burry and Bell are on the front lines of the conflict, and not in the same way that someone behind enemy lines is on. They're on the front lines.
Yeah, they're the tip of the spear.
Yeah, exactly. Like Bell and Burry are right there on the border, trying to help out members of the Republic, right on the outside of the Occlusion Zone, getting raided by Nihil, or in this case, at danger of any moment being sucked into the Stormwall when Marchion just flippantly expands the borders. And so inside is different than outside, whereas inside the conflict, you're complete opposition. You are always for fear of your life, for fear of being spied on. But it's kind of, you hear people talk about this in actual real world conflict, that there's such a sense of danger constantly that you kind of become desensitized to it. And to be a good spy, you kind of have to be desensitized to it. Like some American in the USSR for a decade, some CIA operative, has become a certain amount of desensitized to it, because if you just are constantly literally looking over your shoulder all the time, you're going to go insane. And so some things you just have to go out on a limb and do and say. Whereas Bell and Burry are on the front lines of the conflict in Republic space, where it feels like there's more a sense of disaster all the time.
Yeah.
Where everything bad happens, you feel it really presciently, and then if the Stormwall, if there could be a disaster occur at any time. Like there could be an explosion at any time. There could be the Stormwall expansion anytime. And so it's a completely different mood from inside the Occlusion Zone here.
Yeah, there's a tad bit more hope, but it's like you're staring at a big storm on the horizon.
More hope, and I'd say more anxiety. Yeah. I think both of those together. So the Jedi leave the planet. Burry and Bell leave the planet by the fact that they've been alerted that there are Drengir on a nearby planet.
Yeah,
the Drengir are a species. They're like a plant-based species, but they're sentient. Of all of them are dark side users. The whole species
attuned to the dark side of the Force.
Right. There's a hive mind for them. They're a neat concept. They're a really neat concept, but they were a huge problem in the first phase of the book. Like they're part of the reason the Jedi couldn't beat the Nihil all at once, because Marchion seeded a bunch of Drengir all over the galaxy, and that made the Jedi divert a lot of their attention. So we then get to chapter 6, where we catch up with Elzar Mann, who is fed up being a Senate errand boy. He is this guy. Nothing about Elzar Mann's demeanor or character makes you think that he's going to thrive in the political arena of Coruscant, and he doesn't. But he keeps trying to fill Stellan's shoes, who very clearly played a different role for the Jedi and for their friendship. And a lot of this book is Elzar learning to stop doing that. And so Elzar's filling what would have naturally been Stellan's role as a liaison between the Council and between the Senate. And he is constantly interacting with senators in just negative ways. He just hates his job.
Yeah.
He hides in a closet during this chapter. He talks about how Senator Staros is a Nihil representative. That happened in the last book, where the Nihil are given like a government representative, an ambassador to the Republic.
Begrudgingly, yeah.
Yes, yeah, begrudgingly. And then Elzar, in his head, lists like a dozen characters that he's beholden to in some way. Some of them dead, some of them alive, some of them good, some of them evil. and that he's being spread exceptionally thin. And this is a neat little deal that I don't feel like we've seen from a Jedi before. Just a neat little perspective of how stressed out this guy is. His only light is Avar, and they are still apart, despite the fact that she made it back across the Occlusion Zone. Because before they were apart because they had to be. There was no other way. There was no way for him to get across the Occlusion Zone. Now they're apart, and it's all voluntary. It's because Avar still feels she needs to be on the front lines, which she really does.
And he literally can't.
Yes.
You know, he wants to be there alongside her, helping the people out who really need it, as opposed to just a bunch of bureaucrats who are happy living in their high tower.
Right, exactly. And the council's, like you said, he can't. They've established rules on who can jump into the OZ, and he's not one of them. And so this is a big source of struggle for Elzar. So we have Chapter 7. Avar's message plays throughout the Occlusion Zone. We keep going, and we get back with Porter Engle. He's on the run. He's still hunting for Vis, and the Nihil are employing Nameless all over the place. There's like Nameless at multiple different outposts throughout their space. So this obviously just creates, now that the Jedi can move in and out, they've had to spread out the Nameless a little bit, but the Nameless are creatures that just eat Force users. They kill them, eat them, they're dead.
Yeah.
They suck the Force out of you. And so Porter hears Avar's message, and it inspires him, and her message is connected through various characters through the Occlusion Zone. We hear it from Care, we hear it from Porter, and it's giving us a little bit of that light that it's supposed to.
Every time Porter goes where he thinks General Vis is, she's like just left.
Yes.
So he's this eternally frustrated. I think he goes to 2 or 3 different spots, and she's just not there. She was there moments ago.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple times where I feel like Vis is kind of like Skeletor. Like I'm just like returns for the next episode. So we cut to Marchion, and he just has complete disdain for everyone around him. We kind of already knew that, but it's really on display in this book. Part of because of his mood. Everybody is just like a bug to this guy. Like he just barely enjoys the petty squabbles of his advisors, of his tempests, as he calls them. He has no respect for any Jedi or for any Republic official. He doesn't care less. He couldn't care less about any Nihil. It's not even that he is, a supreme narcissist. It's more like he's this supreme nihilist. He's just like nobody can compare to him in any way. And there's just nothing worth living for.
Like he's elevated to a plane that he's the only inhabitant.
Exactly. So then there are mentions of strange disappearances around Wild Space. This is very interesting. Then we learn that Ro has a secret sanctum that nobody can enter without ever any blood. It will self-destruct. That's certainly going to come up in the next book.
Yeah.
Then Ro sees the ash. So he's at a council meeting of his tempests, and he's hallucinating his father. He's hallucinating Marta's ghost. And I say hallucinating. He's like, he says that this is something that all Evereni experience, that they see visions of their ancestors.
Right. That'd be creepy.
Yeah. Super creepy. And so as he sees these different ancestors, and he sees ash, the blight, spreading from them, from the Evereni specifically, towards, he's imagining it crawling up his different Tempest runners. And so this is like, I kind of read this as like a subconscious self-loathing almost. Yeah. This is left a little bit as a question mark, though. Yeah,
and now looking back on it, it could be communicating an idea to him somehow.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we learned that this facility called the Lightning Crash is where they keep the Stormwall powered, and where the path key is centered around. And so it can only extend so far. It's only got so much power. That's why they're growing these false kyber to keep it powered. But it's not like he could just extend the Stormwall forever. And even if he did, then the whole galaxy's inside it, and it's like it doesn't exist anyways.
Yeah, and these scenes, to me, illustrate that, the Stormwall is a finite thing, especially you factor in the blight and consuming of these crystals by these devices, and they're running into a problem here where they're just not going to work one of these days.
Right. Yeah, and this is a problem of government. Like, this is Ro's issues. He never wanted to be a governor. And this is a problem of how is your government going to continue to fuel this lightning crash, let alone feed its subjects. But, your main source of defense has to constantly be updated. And so you have to have logistics surrounding that.
Yeah. Serious logistics.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's So, some people boil down the function of government to just logistics, and that's not wrong. That's why the Roman Empire is famous and successful, is because they figured out logistics. And so this is the same problem for him, is he doesn't want to govern. He doesn't want to figure out logistics, and that's not Ro's strong point anyway. We learned that Ro isn't the source of the Drengir resurgence, because he is also given the news that the Drengir are resurging. And so this is just all news to him. And so he's the only thing he can care about and focus on right now is thinking about the blight. All he can think about is when he can leave to go to learn more about this blight that he saw.
Yeah. Yep.
So we cut to Gira Staros, and she can't read Ro. They're lovers. But even though she thinks she can read him, she just can't. He reads her like a book, and she can't figure out anything about the guy. And it's because she can't wrangle a storm like that. I mean, that's, kind of a cheesy pun, but that's true, is that this guy is an enigma to her because she can't possibly understand Ro's machinations.
Right. And she's just a plaything to him.
Right.
That was kind of well established in the previous book. But she's like, I want to go do XYZ. He's like, okay.
Yeah. Just
whatever gets you out of my hair.
Yeah. Do her fun little government thing that he just views as like her playing around. So we also know that Gira has a daughter. Avon Sunvale has already been mentioned. Her real name is Avon Staros. She's helping the Republic. She has escaped the Stormwall, and she's helping the Republic by developing these devices. Hates her mom. Hates Gira for good reason.
Yeah, like everybody else does, because she's like ambassador to an overtly murderous regime. So.
Right. Exactly. Then so Burry and Bell, they're sent off to investigate the Drengir resurgence, and there's obviously something wrong with this dying Drengir. He's been cut off from the hive mind, and he's been afflicted by the creeping ash. So now the Republic is aware of the blight. Bell and Burry are the first ones to discover it. So we then have Elzar go into a pretty deep just introspection in the next chapter, where he comes to grip with his use of the dark side of the Force.
Oh yeah, this one really got me. This chapter is crazy.
Yeah, it is. So he's sitting there contemplating how he used the dark side. He killed somebody a year ago.
Cut him in half.
Yeah, exactly. Named Chancey Yarrow.
Yeah, and it sounded like it was like head to toe.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. And that was through the dark side. And so he's been repentant this whole time, but stricken with guilt.
It was a factor of the person he killed was trying to save Starlight Beacon, and he just jumped out of his little ship and whacked her.
Right, exactly. And so he's going to confess about Chancey Yarrow to the council, which I did not realize he hadn't done. This was a little bit news to me. It's been over a year, we know, since this happened. This seems like a precursor to Soul and the Acolyte. Like, this is, after having read that, I'm like, oh, wow. Like, if Elzar's hiding this from the council like this, and this is kind of, we had some discussions during the Acolyte about, well, why didn't they tell the council, and how would the council react? I think this scene is a good example of how the council would have reacted.
What's the council doing? Chopping people's thumbs off or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I would tell them either, but goodness.
Yeah, but they react totally in one pretty expected Jedi way. Like, if you're a Jedi, you should kind of assume this is how it's going to happen. And two, they react in a way that is just completely, they don't do anything about it. They just are empathetic about it is all. And I'm not saying
that's what I would think would happen here.
That's what?
That's what would happen here, right? If he... Because he doesn't actually confess. He gets stopped right before, right?
No. He confesses. Oh. Yes, and that's what happens. And that's what I'm saying would have happened to Soul. Is that
There's
he would have.
Too much Star Wars in my brain.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like, for the Acolyte, it's like, why did those guys not confess, man?
Yeah.
So anyway, he's going to confess about Chancey Yarrow. He's like, I'm going to go confess. And then he gets summoned by the council. Force works in mysterious ways. So he goes, and it's like, all right, whatever this is about, we're going to talk about it,
now.
And then I'm going to confess. And then the subject is him joining the Jedi Council, and he immediately blurts out, he's like, I killed someone. And Yoda says, killed someone we all have. Like, what are you talking about?
Like, okay.
And he's like, no, I murdered somebody. And the Jedi forgive him, like, as they're supposed to. They're like, we understand what happened, yada, yada. And then they still want him to join the council. And a lot of his guilt comes from how Stellan would feel, because he doesn't feel like he can live up. He was like, Stellan never would have done this. This wouldn't have happened to my perfect friend. And so this is a big source of Elzar's character flaws.
The result of Elzar, if he hadn't done that, could have saved Stellan Geos.
Yes.
Probably not.
But could. I mean, through his mind, that's the only thing standing between. Just like to Avar, her not being on Starlight Beacon is what got Stellan killed because he was there.
Exactly right.
And so Elzar's entire character, all of his struggles are based around him comparing himself to Stellan when he just really has to understand he's just not Stellan. They're different people. So we then cut to Avar, and she is reflecting on the golden years of the Jedi Order before the Nihil, where she says, the Jedi were in an age of glory without peer. They were basically in a renaissance. And this is the whole kind of thesis of the High Republic era, is that right before all this Nihil stuff sprouted up, it's been hundreds of years of uninterrupted, no conflict whatsoever. Like, there's been little tiny planetary skirmishes. And this is why the Nihil are such a surprise and out of nowhere, is because the Jedi have truly been in an age of glory.
Not a war, but a conflict.
Yes, yeah, exactly. You got to jump through a lot of hoops to not call this thing a war. It's a military engagement. So anyway, we also learned Avar sold her headpiece. This was just kind of a little bit... This is like, I think, more of a comic book thing. I never even imagine Avar without her headpiece. Obviously, she's drawn with it, but I was like, okay. Like, it's supposed to really symbolize how good of a Jedi she is, that she sold it to feed some people. And I get it, but I'm also just like, headpiece, random little insert right here. This is our first peek into Vernestra here. And because of the Acolyte, these pages read differently now. Like, there's definitely more to read into these pages. And everything she says and does is colored by that now, is colored by the Acolyte.
I'm glad I listened to it before.
Yeah, well, that's what I did not. And so I was reading it in tandem with it.
Because she's heroic, this whole book.
In this scene, she pipes up and suggests that civilians should be the ones to take care of the Nameless for the Jedi. And Avar, throughout this, is thinking, she's like, we shouldn't put civilians in the line of fire like that. Like, it's the Jedi's job to overcome this. And so now that Avar is sitting there thinking that, she doesn't say it. She's like, oh, this is a good idea, Vernestra. But it makes Vernestra seem even more selfish after having seen the Acolyte, because we now know how much she will grate against average citizens, non-force using senators in the future to defend the Jedi Order. So this makes it feel like she has a lower impression of people who are not members of the Jedi Order, to the lengths she will go to defend it during the Acolyte.
Whereas before the Acolyte, she's just trying to figure out her...
Yeah, she's just an enterprising young person. Exactly. And so this was an interesting read of that scene for me. So the calming music as Avar thinks of the Force song, and Stellan's old notes is super comforting. So Avar perceives the Force as a song, and Stellan just has these old notes that she's sitting there remembering and feeling, and that was a nice little touching scene there. So the Nihil, we think, track Avar and Vernestra out of the Occlusion Zone. They've come back into Republic space. They get ready to get in their vectors and engage, and then we learn that it's actually Xylan Graf in a Nihil ship, and he tells them that he knows how to defeat the Stormwall. So we then know that Porter is sneaking into another Ministry of Protection facility once again. Again, Vise just left. He's rifling through her office for information, though. And then we get a reference to Porter's sister from the Blade comic. Not his actual blood sister, but a person he calls his sister.
Yeah.
We keep going through the book, and we learn that Naboo is the home of the Santekas. Naboo is also the site of a big Nihil resistance movement. Makes sense. That's good. Naboo is like a central... Again, if they want to connect it to the rest of Star Wars, they're using Naboo as basically the central point of conflict within the Occlusion Zone. It's definitely the most famous planet that's inside the Occlusion Zone for Star Wars viewers and fans. Like, Naboo's the one we're going to recognize most readily of any of the ones in the Occlusion Zone. We also learn that Care Santeka, that his pet, his snow dog, has been locked up by Vise. And she almost kills it. And I don't know why she didn't kill the dog. Like, she's super evil. She kills many people. Like, she should have killed the dog. Like, that is I know that a lot of times writers don't like to kill off animals. They'd rather kill off people. And that killing off an animal oftentimes elicits a more emotional reaction than a person dying. But Vise's MO would definitely have been to just kill this dog.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So she does wound it. in front of Care, and then we see that Care is going to be held hostage by V. She knows that he's at the center of the Resistance network. He has all these spies everywhere, and she's figured all this out. Cut to chapter 16. We're back with Xylan Graf. This guy sucks. He's just such a jerk. He is telling them how to defeat the lightning crash and how to get through the Stormwall, and he references Starlight Beacon as being putting all your eggs in one basket. And it's just like, what to write to Avar's face, like, what a jerk. But anyway, he says he has an encryption key that can only be broken by Avon Sunveil, Ghira's daughter, the inventor of the Sunveil device that lets him through the Stormwall, and it will render the Stormwall useless. So Burry and Bell discover the spreading Ashy disease in the next chapter, or they discover some more about it. And then we cut back to Naboo, where Care is doing his first freedom fighter thing. We have heard a bunch about him being a freedom fighter, and now we actually see it, where he breaks a bottle and stabs a guy through the neck. Good little scene. It was cool. It was really neat. But again, you're gonna write multiple paragraphs about this guy getting stabbed by a glass bottle. You won't kill the dog. Yeah. So Care sends out a message letting Bell and Real know that he's been compromised, and then the Nihil descend on him. So we get back to Coruscant, and Elzar is, I think, a little foolish in this scene. He's walking around talking about how it's so awful that Coruscant's just moving along like nothing's going on around the rest of the galaxy, that they're just business as usual. And that's a little naive, but it's also what happens in the real world. We know in our own lives that it is exhausting and impossible to care about every little thing happening around the world. No. On a galactic scale, it's even harder.
I can't imagine.
And so he's kind of being a whiner here, basically, is what I'm saying.
I mean, he has been in the thick of it with all this stuff.
That's true. That he's experiencing it a lot more personally than everybody. But again, it's just like, he's like, how could they not care? And it's like, I can tell you very easily how they cannot care. It is millions of miles away.
Yep.
So the meeting, there's also a meeting with Graf and Sunveil to get the Republic the key, and they get it to work. So we cut to Avar at the Jedi Temple. And this is an important scene. This is a big scene. Most of the big scenes in this book, it's called Temptation of the Force for a reason, happened between Avar and Elzar. So Avar continues to wrestle with her being a star, basically being a celebrity Jedi, and a light when she feels like she failed with Starlight Beacon. She's like, why are people, why do they rely on me? Why do they care about me? I already failed, yada, yada. Avar and Elzar decide to meditate together privately in a private garden in the Jedi Temple. Avar admits that she blames herself for Stellan's death. And then Elzar almost says, and definitely means and feels, that he's happy that Avar survived over Stellan, which makes him feel very guilty, which, again, is, I think, really good writing, because that's an average person response. Like, you would feel really guilty about that, but that's something that could happen. I mean, that's a way that a person could feel. You just are going to have these preferences, and so it makes him feel exceptionally guilty. This was just something that felt very natural to me. We then see Elzar gives Avar a new headpiece. The headpiece has been gone for like 6 chapters, but it was gone so he could give her a new one.
Yeah.
We then just get some more touching moments. But then Elzar tells Avar that he's going to be on the council, and this feels wrong to Avar for a couple reasons. She's like, this doesn't seem like Elzar. She's also a tad jealous. I mean, it does acknowledge that a little bit. Not that it's that extreme of an emotion, but she has just kind of a knee-jerk reaction to feel that way.
This is also in the context from the previous book of replacing the guy who got dusted in the last one, remember? So he's not just on the council, he's like taking a spiritual successor in a sense. He'd be the new guy, but this really high
was the Grand Master.
The Grand Master is
one
gone,
of the 3, yeah.
And now we're asking this guy to be.
Right. And they have yet to fill Stellan's seat. Yeah. And so there's a whole element of Elzar being selected to fill Stellan's shoes, maybe even in not even a metaphorical way anymore, in just an actual literal way.
Maybe Avar just hadn't been checking her emails or something.
Right.
Hey, you need to come claim your council seat now.
Right. So Ghira Starros learns that Marchion Ro is gone, and he's left with 2 levelers, and it's just, again, for her job is exceptionally hard. It's just, she has to deal with all kinds of crap. She is trying, of any of the characters, despite her also being evil, she is the only one who's trying to legitimize the Nihil in any way, and is the only one who has any semblance of a plan further beyond tomorrow.
Yeah, but she's also delusional in thinking that she's actually going to get somewhere.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That is also true.
Like she's putting her belief in Marchion Rowe to be successful when he's also this terrible, like the worst person in the galaxy at the time, and it's not going to work out for her.
Yeah, right. Absolutely not.
It's hilarious to watch her go about her business and just be like, man, this is going to be so bad for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We can see it and you can't. She also has a conversation with Vise about how not to underestimate Xylan Graf, because Vise is like, there's no way he's going to figure it out. And she's like, yeah, he probably will. Anyway, we come back to Marchion Rowe, where he returns to the field of ashen crystals. And he's keeping this from his advisor Bulin, who is like not a factor in this book. We know that Bulin has been experimenting on random nameless and giving them like cybernetic augmentations.
Put a camera on their back.
Yeah, exactly. He's given one metal feet and a cybernetic spine. But he's not even in the book except for one scene where all three of the advisors meet together. And he doesn't, I don't think, even say anything. So he's keeping the information of the Blight from Bulin. And we learn that he has a few unhatched leveler eggs. We also see that Marchion thinks the leveler is reacting to Marta's ghost just for a second. Something that only Everini are supposed to be able to even see, like is essentially a biologic genetic hallucination, and that the leveler is kind of reacting to it. And so that was an interesting little data point. I want to see how they explore that in the next book.
That'd be interesting.
He still has not said her name. Like you said, he doesn't say it the whole book, that acknowledges that it's Marta. I think there's enough clues that we can confidently say it is, though. We also learned that the levelers are afraid of the ash, afraid of the blight. And so, despite the blight doing basically the same thing the levelers do, they are also afraid of it, which makes it really an interesting mystery. And Rowe is invigorated by this mystery. He's like, he feels more himself than he did in the last book.
Yeah, he's intrigued.
Yeah.
And it's a step forward from where he was of just being a depressed, sad person.
Yes, exactly. And we also see the blight is more attracted to the levelers than it is to other things. It creeps faster towards them than it does to other stuff. And so all of that's just, there's a lot of, we get a ton of data points about the blight just throughout this book. Like, it slowly builds up that we keep learning more and more about it. So we cut to Elzar. He demands of the council that he wants to go on a trip to the Stormwall, and also tells them that he's not going to make his decision yet. They say, okay. The council's very non-combative about this. Then they have forced Xylan Graf to be on the ship with everybody else as they try to cross the barrier, because they don't trust the guy.
Yeah.
And so that was
I just got out of this place. I'm not going back.
Exactly. And so but they make him be on there because it could be a trap, and he's not going to let himself get killed. And so we learn it works. They do get across the Occlusion Zone. So now we've got a planned Republic force in the Occlusion Zone. It's a two-pronged assault. They're after the lightning crash, and there's an attack on Naboo planned. And Elzar's leading the lightning crash attack. Avar is leading the Naboo attack. And so we get to Naboo. Avar comes in. Supposedly there are no nameless on Naboo. They can't sense any. We learn that's not true. But so far they can't sense any. Bell and Buryaga are also on this mission. And we learn that this was the Drengir they make a lot more sense in this trilogy, because I'd say in phase 1, you really feel like they're just kind of there to serve the role of a second villain, like just to make the book longer, just give us a conflict. Now we're seeing a lot of them come up and tie in the fact that they're a hive mind and that they're all controlled by this thing called the Great Progenitor. Well, anyways, we learn that the Great Progenitor, which was supposed to be in stasis on Starlight and taken off, never got taken off, and that when Starlight crashed into the ocean of Iram, that the Great Progenitor is now down there in the ocean of Iram. Goodness. And so Burry's the one who realizes this, and so this has caused just another big problem about the Drengir and what's going on. So we get to the attack on the lightning crash. There's an exciting space battle here. It's well written, I thought. Elzar is part of the attack. He's leading it. And this conflict with the Nihil is what the Jedi assume to be deceptively easy. It's just, it has not been difficult whatsoever.
In the past, the there's always these dirty tricks by the Nihil with their path dries and this and that. And they're just able to roll them pretty easy.
Right. And so they do roll them. The crash is destroyed, and Xylan confirms that the Stormwall's down. So when the Stormwall goes down, thus commences the attack on Naboo. This is all a little bit of a coincidence here. Vise is taunting Care right before the attack on Naboo, and then Porter shows up and locks blades with Vise, having no prior knowledge that there's about to be an attack on Naboo. So he just, right place, right time for Porter. The Force is working through these chapters. So we cut to Lena So, who up until this point has not had a chapter from her perspective, which is a big...
and she's the Chancellor.
Yeah, she's the Chancellor. This is a big depart from the Eye of Darkness, where like a quarter of the chapters were from Lena So's perspective.
Yeah.
We spend a bunch of time with her. And then the second half of this book, we do spend a lot of time from her perspective, but this is the first one we've gotten from her perspective so far. That was an interesting note to me. They do a lot of this throughout this, where they bring characters to the forefront and then really push them to the sidelines to highlight other characters. The only characters that have really always consistently been featured are like Bell and Avar. I'd even say Elzar takes a backseat in a couple different novels. Like there's Bell and Avar are the only two that I think consistently receive attention.
Yeah.
So we learn that So has kept Staros waiting with a comm embargo above Coruscant while this whole plan has gone into action. Really cool, good move from her. And she also learns that it worked and the invasion of Naboo has begun. And so we open the invasion of Naboo with this big space battle. That place is just always getting hammered with space battles. The Phantom Menace, after Return of the Jedi, Leia's in a space battle in Naboo. Like, it's just over and over that Naboo is just the site of crazy space battles. So then some large Nihil ships jump into the sector, and now it's a real fight because the Jedi were easily handling who's on Naboo right now. We see Vise and Porter engage in their long-standing beef. They have another fight. This is one of many fights they've had together where they've locked blades again. And Porter then begins to have fear of the Nameless because the Nameless are brought into the room behind him while Vise is locking lightsabers with him. And Vise forces them away. She makes the Nihil take the Nameless out of the room and leave because she wants a fair fight. She genuinely thinks she can beat a Jedi. A Jedi can beat, and she, for all we know, has beaten Jedi before, but thinks she can beat Porter.
Yeah.
And she wants the fair fight, which is all about arrogance here. Like, this is her being way too arrogant. And so we learn that. We see that later on. Then we see all the Jedi are on planet, Burry and Avar and Bell, and Burry runs right into the Nameless. The end of this chapter is Burryaga running a corner, and boom, there is the Nameless right there. So we then have Burryaga, Bell, Vernestra round this corner, see the Nameless. They're fighting the Nihil and the Nameless at the same time. There are Republic Defense Coalition troops with them. They do not. This is from Care Santeca's perspective, by the way. The RDC troops shoot and kill some Nihil. Then they round and turn their attention on more Nihil down a different hallway. And this is one of the only times in the book where I was like, I think this is just bad writing. Like, why would they not have shot the Nameless? That's why they're here. Yeah. They explicitly said, we're going to bring regular people with us to shoot the Nameless. It's an animal. Like, it's a couple rounds into the side and it's dead. And so that just threw me off big time. It's not even shooting back at you, and they kill the Nihil that are standing beside the Nameless. So again, I think that this was a good book. This is not like a massive critique, but this chapter, I was like, what? I was like, this, why did you go out of your way to tell us that that's why they're here and then have them not do that? So, and then, we see that the way the Nameless are killed is an important plot point. But again, just don't tell us that's why the RDC's here. So the Nameless are coming closer to the Jedi, about to attack them, and Burryaga is hallucinating through fear. That's what the Nameless do, is they make Jedi experience like a visceral fear. And he sees Bell slowly decaying already with the Nameless. And this really, really distresses Burry because of how strong these two have a connection. And it mentions a tone of Bell's voice of fear that Burry had never heard before. And that makes complete sense because the Jedi can measure and maintain their fear a lot better than an average person, but not when the Nameless are around. We see this in the previous book with General Master Veeder and how he reacts to the Nameless. Well, anyways, Care comes to Vernestra. She has a blaster. He has a blaster. They guide each other to help Vernestra shoot the Nameless. And then also Buryaga is able to overcome the Nameless here. He like is experience. So Jedi can't even visibly see the Nameless. They're just like
they're like not even empty hole. They're just like nothing there.
Yeah,
almost.
exactly. And they can. It's like this just pulsing source of terrible emotion and fear, but they can't see anything. And so Buryaga is just like gets closer and is able to plunge his lightsaber into the void essentially. And he kills the Nameless that way. And this is like how was Buryaga able to overcome something that a Jedi Grandmaster couldn't do? And we learn why later in the book. And there's a lot of this is not the Grandmaster's in like an arena by himself without a weapon, or he has his lightsaber, but that's it. Like there's a lot going on here, where playing in Burry's favor. And we learn there has something to do with number of Jedi around.
Right.
And so, we go to the next chapter, and they just keep so they're cleaning up the lightning crash and its wreckage, and they just keep insisting on caution because they are like, there has to be a Nihil trap coming. There has to be a Nihil trap coming. There never is, and it's because the Republic and the Jedi have essentially forgotten what victory felt like, and it has been a relatively short amount of time. I mean, this is over 2 years. But they just can't imagine them getting one over the Nihil without there being another shoe ready to drop. And so that was really important, I thought. So we then have Elzar get into this like little verbal tiff with Xylan, and he says this line, "Caring is what makes us different from the Nihil." This is like a better way to deliver Rose Tico's line from The Last Jedi. We don't win by killing what we hate, we win by saving what we love. And this is like just a better message from what Elzar's saying, because they're not the same. They're not one for one. Stopping Finn's sacrifice is not true love, regardless of what. That's just, that's a different topic. But this is what they're trying to say. This is the point they're trying to get across in The Last Jedi with that line. And this makes more sense, is that the Nihil don't care about anything. They only want destruction, and that fighting for something you care about will strengthen you more than just fighting for the sake of destruction.
Yeah. Plunder and chicanery.
Right.
Hedonism.
Exactly. So cut back to Naboo. Avar is still flying around, coordinating the attack. She is just exceptional at coordinating the Jedi because of the way she experiences the Force. Makes her a great Jedi combatant. She would have been great in the Ancient Sith Wars or the Clone Wars. She's like epitome of born at the wrong time, because she could in a concentrated, prolonged war conflict, Avar Kriss would be invaluable to the Jedi Order.
Yeah. She'd go and wipe nobody would stand a chance with her at the helm.
Yeah, exactly. And so then Vise escapes after all the Jedi arrive in the room. This is another Skeletor moment. She sees the other Jedi come up. There's 3 of them, Burry, Vernestra, and Bell, and then Porter's still engaged with her. And so she smartly realizes she's not going to win. Now it's not a fair fight in her favor. So she hits Porter in the chest with a concussion grenade. Doesn't say she has access to other grenades, but I'm willing to bet she does. And actually, we know that she collapses the room later with a grenade. And so she probably did. She is really invested in killing Porter in a fair fight, which is not out of character for her, but is just so arrogant of her. So she escapes. And I really like this. So she escapes to the hangar, gets in Care Santeca's yacht, and is taking off. And they try to stop it, are not able to. And then all 4 of the Jedi grab skimmers. They got to be speeders or cars, and throw them at the yacht. They're unsuccessful. Super cool scene, though. Super cool visual. Great way. They're literally 4 of them through the Force, grabbing something the size of a car and just launching it at that ship. I was a big fan of that.
Very cool scene.
So Vise does escape, though. Nothing really, there's basically no damage. She's able to get away. And then we cut to Coruscant where Lena So is gloating to Staros. And Staros is obviously caught off guard. She didn't know that this whole attack was going to happen because of the comm embargo.
And what is it? Staros, she's all like, her perceived false legitimacy is she feels slighted. And Lena So's like, what do you mean?
Right, right.
You align with murderers. Of course we're going to do this.
Yes, yeah, like, yeah, it's, again, Staros is just kind of, she's a little tone deaf. She does not really understand the plot here.
Yeah.
So we then learn Marchion Ro is not even in the Occlusion Zone when all of this happens. He's in Republic space studying the Blight. He's on the planet where Buryaga and Bell found the singular Drengir. And this again just demonstrates Ro doesn't care about the Occlusion Zone. He doesn't care about governing. He doesn't care about anything except causing the Republic and the Jedi pain. And so this is why I liked his story. I mean, I think this chapter is really where it clicked for me, that Ro's character is only driven not by destruction like some random Nihil, but through having a worthy, not adversary, because he doesn't feel like he has a worthy adversary, but having a worthy challenge of figuring out how to tame the Nameless, figuring out how to see the Drengir, figuring out how to destroy Starlight, figuring out how to cut off a part of the galaxy from the Republic, and now figuring out the Blight.
No,
like,
the guy is
driven only by challenge. And so I think that that's why this part of the story compelled me so much, because it's Ro discovering essentially the ultimate challenge, which is mastering this Blight, which is his plot in the book, is mastering the Blight here. And so, we learn
destruction, not to stop it.
No, yeah, not to stop it. We learn that there is a crystal array on Hetzal being constructed. So, assumedly, something that's going to power the Stormwall, not the lightning crash. Because you can't destroy a planet. I mean, you can, but that technology is a few hundred years off.
Yep.
And so he's constructing a crystal array on Hetzal. And as speculated, Ro wants to control the Blight like his own organic Death Star, basically. I mean, You see the Blight on a populated planet, you might as well have destroyed it. It's because it's important to note, it doesn't just kill organic things. I mean, it destroys rocks.
Turns it into dust.
Yeah, exactly. It's if you turn a diamond into dust, it's not worth anything. And so we get to chapter 36. The attacks are successful. We're in the Occlusion Zone. The Jedi come together. They're all kind of sharing a meal on Naboo and having some camaraderie. It talks about Porter cooking for everybody, which has just been a little part of his character.
It's cool to see them come back as a crew,
Oh, it was, I really liked this scene where everybody's together, they're all recovering from the conflict.
I'm sitting there thinking, it's like, man, he's back, because he's been lost.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, he's been doing his own thing. Like lost really isn't the right term, but disconnected, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so now they're reunited. And I'm like, man, they're really going to get some stuff done now.
Yeah, womp womp. Elzar comes in the doorway, and I reread this a few times to make sure I got it right. Avar runs to him and kisses him in public. This is their first kiss, and there are multiple Jedi around and multiple random civilians around. And I don't want to go so far as to say this is a fault of the writing. I'm sure it was intentional, but I'm like mind boggled by this. I'm like, do they have no discretion whatsoever?
Yeah.
And so like I said, I reread this a few times, and it's like ambiguous enough. It's like Elzar is standing in the doorway, so maybe it's just like the door jams are blocking it. But it was weird. I was like, huh?
More like a slightly. Like a kiss on the cheek, like you see on TV, like some Italian thing.
Right, exactly. And so their first kiss was, I think the wind was taken out of it a little bit just for me because I reread it so many times, and I was like, what? Anyways, Avar and Elzar are having a conversation where they finally realize something that we as readers have known since the first book, that they balance each other, that one is hyper-focused on his own emotions, that's why he gave into the dark side, and that Avar is not focused on her own emotions at all. She's focused on the emotions of others, which is demonstrated through the way she experiences the Force, and that those are complementary to each other, that they're nowhere near as strong without each other. And so Elzar is, we get some scenes, or not some scenes, a scene of them talking about their attachment, and their attachment to each other, and it's really, really interesting because Elzar begins to shun it. Like, they're talking about their love for each other and that they've been disconnected through the Occlusion Zone for so long, and that it's time they committed to each other. And as a Jedi, you're just not supposed to do that. You're not. That is not what a Jedi is supposed to do. And so Elzar is right to shun this attachment, especially because of the way that he feels and touches the dark side. And so it seems like it's going to end poorly for him. And my question is can they even truly, really love each other and remain Jedi? You know, selflessness is a tenet of the Order, and loving somebody more than another person is going to cloud that. That's the point of the Jedi attachment, other than just falling to the dark side.
They have to leave and not be Jedi anymore to be with each other.
Right. But we get a really interesting description from Avar during this chapter of her love for Elzar being described of this like limitless Force-like love, that her love for him is an amplifier for her in the Force, and that she doesn't love him more than a regular person, but that it's just felt in a different way. And so I kind of wrestled a lot with this chapter because I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. They do an exceptional job of explaining it a few chapters later, though. So when we get there, we'll talk about it. So, chapter 37, the only note I have, we learned that Ro, as a child, had path codes etched into his body with a blade. Super metal. That was super cool that he has these codes carved into him. And Ro changes the code based on one of the codes on his body from the previous one, from the Mari Santeca code. And now the Jedi's method of getting through the Stormwall doesn't work anymore.
Oh, no.
That was just good. It was just, this was metal. It was like, I mean, now when he's shirtless later in the book, obviously it's a book, you can't tell, but this dude just has a star map tattooed over his entire body. It was a pretty cool
That's meaningful.
Visual device. Yeah, it is meaningful. Not
just some tattoo.
No, yeah, exactly. And not actually tattooed, carved into his body. Yeah. Like they were scars. So everyone discovers then that Ro has changed the key code. And then we get to a meeting where there's a lot of Jedi meeting, Republic Defense Coalition officials, and it's from Vernestra's perspective, and she feels out of her depth in these important meetings. But we know that the fact that she's in these meetings at her age, the fact that she rose to knighthood at such an early age, the fact that Stellan Gios was her master, is all a precursor to her rise to influence in the Order. Because we learn at the end of the Acolyte, she's on the Council, or she at least represents what the Council has to say. And so that's all just a little insight there. And then everybody realizes that they need a path engine again, which was the original goal of the last book, was just finding one of those in the first place. So they're like, oh, we're in a battlefield with all kinds of destroyed Nihil tech. There's got to be a path engine somewhere. Xylan traps Care Santeca on board the Third Horizon, headed for Republic space. He had already told him he was going to force him to come to Republic space with him. And so we then see Care get trapped on that ship. And then we get to chapter 41, where they're coming back through the Stormwall, this time with Vernestra's original method of basically programming it with the Force as we go. And we see a cool depiction of Jedi teamwork, different from the Crisis on Hetzal from the beginning of the Light of the Jedi book, the very first book, where the Force is freely flowing through every Jedi on board. Like they open themselves up as conduits to amplify the Force in Vernestra. And I like how it opens up these characters to each other despite distances between each other. Right. Physical distances.
It's a cool concept overall, even back in that first book and seeing it happen again. Mm-hmm. It just, almost any way it's depicted is beyond cool.
Right. And Burryaga, even in his mind, describes it as, in the first book, it's this concentrated effort. You can feel everyone coming together for a specific goal. And here, it's more just opening yourself up to the Force and letting it flow from you into another person. And so it's a lot calmer way. And so I really enjoyed that. And this is one of those parts where it's like, you can't get that in a movie. You can't get that in a TV show. It's just, this is something that has to be delivered in literature. Chapter 42 comes around. We get a real clever Indiana Jones moment here. I thought this was maybe one of my favorite things in the book. Porter is in a facility, one of Visa's facilities, and he can see scrawled in blood at the end of the hallway a message for him that says, meet me here with an arrow down, and pointing to a message that is too small for him to read. So he throws his lightsaber into the wall and then carves the oval of it out and brings the oval of the wall to him through the Force. This triggers a trap, but he's far enough away that it doesn't affect him. And that was super cool for me. I was like, that was really, cool. Really neat, man.
Porter Engle, he never stops being cool. Just everything he does.
Yeah, absolutely. And we learned that the message is Visa's challenging him to a fight on the planet where they had made first contact all those years ago, back in Phase 2. So we get back to Burryaga, and he's struggling to explain how he overcame the Nameless, which is important because, you know, we are also asking the same question of how could he have possibly done this? He's just a Jedi Knight, where the Grand Master of the Order couldn't do this. And so he's presenting this to the Council via hologram. And so Burry also recognizes the threat of the Blight, and he's explaining this to the Jedi Council. You know, good opportunity for him to be like, hey, we got a problem here. It's good to see him sharing that knowledge. And then we learn that the reason he overcame the Nameless is, one, because Burry Aga is exceptionally empathic. They've spent like 4 adult novels and a bunch of young adult novels explaining this to us, like hammering into our head that Burry Aga is an exceptionally empathic Jedi. And that's how the Jedi can detect the Nameless, kind of. Like, we don't have the full story yet as the reader, but the fact that Burry Aga is so empathic is a big part of that. It's an important element.
Yeah, he's key to it.
Yes.
Later on, especially. Really good stuff.
Yes.
Coming up.
So we then get to a dinner between Lena So and Gira Staros, and Elzar is there to represent the Jedi Order. And Elzar is just sitting there, again, completely out of his depth with the politics and like, how on earth are we sitting across from this lady at this dinner? And
yeah, he thinks they should have no contact with her at all.
Right, exactly. So we learn that So mentions that her son is stuck behind the Occlusion Zone and she wants him back. And this is the first mention of that also this whole book. And we like haven't heard anything from this guy for 2 books. He was a character in the Phase 1 books, and now it's like we don't have any information on him. Yeah. He hasn't come up at all. So wants her son back, and so Gira's like, all right, well, you know exactly where my daughter is. She's probably like a few hundred feet away from us, and so give her up. And So refuses, which Elzar is like kind of surprised by. I mean, you know, obviously Lena So is not a Jedi. She doesn't even have to be detached from her emotions. But as a leader of any group of people, you have to weigh your own emotions and your own connection with your family versus the group of people. And she is declaring her allegiance as the leader of the galaxy as opposed to getting her son back, which is pretty amazing. Good character moment for Lena So.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the same spot, given the chance, would trade that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody would be tempted to, at least. And then, like, it's the Republic. She's not a queen. She can't just tell, oh, you got to go with your mom. Sorry, bye.
Right. Absolutely. We then know Gira's sweating a little bit because they're asking her, like, where is Marchion Ro? And she has no idea. She has no clue. And is just keeping up this facade. And then Lena So demands, she's like, we need to be talking to Marchion Ro. Like, I am the head of state for the legitimate government that is not even just based on its legitimacy, but like triple the size of the Occlusion Zone. Like, why is she dealing with some minister when she should be dealing directly with Marchion Ro? And so all good points here from that chapter. So we then see that Ro is running all kinds of experiments. He's been running experiments on the Drengir. He ran experiments on the Nameless, on the Blight, and that this guy just thrives on being able to do that and being able to just run these experiments on all different kinds of things to develop weapons and committing atrocities. And that's how he views it, is he's just seeing what happens. I mean, it's like a mad scientist thing. What it really reminds me of is, it vividly reminds me of the Japanese unit in World War II, Unit 731, who did a bunch of human experiments that were atrocious. I mean, it was some of the worst war crimes of the war. But that Ro takes this methodical scientific approach to the same way that those experiments are described in those logs. And like, they're just describing scientifically cutting open a person while they're still alive. Yeah. And it's the same with Ro here. It's like he throws the Nihil over. He just has no empathy. The guy is like just a bona fide psychopath.
Yeah. And you can't understate it almost. The stuff he's doing here and the goals and the stuff he's done in the past. He's such an embodiment of so many different villains in our natural history and in a lot of different things. He's such a good character.
He is. He's a really good character for sure. I wish that we could get this translated to the screen too. I would really love to see him on screen somehow. So this chapter ends with Ro walking straight into the Blight, completely unfazed.
Yeah, he's figured out a way to stop it.
Yes.
Or not be hurt by it.
Not be affected by it. And that's just a good way to end this chapter. we're back on Oan, which is the initial forest planet that Burry and Bell were trying to get evacuated from the beginning of the book. And we learn that the Blight is on this planet, which is a big problem. This is an inhabited world. And it's not only is it inhabited, we are led to believe that the species can't survive off this planet.
Yeah.
And so Burryaga goes out to investigate the Blight, and he says that the Blight itself feels sad. And that there's something wrong with the Blight. Like, it has an emotional feel. And Burryaga, being exceptionally empathic, is going to be able to feel this. The Blight's destroying this nativity forest. And then Burryaga says that he can feel the Blight pulling for the Force, that it's approaching him because he's Force sensitive. And then he begins to try and push back against the Blight with the Force. We cut back to Coruscant. Elzar turns the council seat down, to the surprise of not Yoda. It's like, yeah, okay. He says he doesn't want to be rooted to the council. Roots were Stellan's place, basically. Like, Elzar finally gets that he needs to stop trying to be Stellan. Only took 7 books. Well, I guess 5, but only took 5 books. Elzar then starts talking about how much the living force needs him, and this is kind of the first time I realized this, but just so many similarities between he and Qui-Gon, turning down a council seat, talking about the living force in this way. Kind of bucking the council at different points, all really in line with Qui-Gon.
Yeah, Elzar is one of the most enthralling journeys throughout all these books. He's been on sabbatical. He's done brushed against the dark side, flirting with this love interest thing, and there's a lot more compelling characters. Like I said, but this one is some real advancement for him here as well.
Right.
He's coming to more complete picture here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He really is. He's fleshed out as his own independent character, where he's basically been living vicariously through the other two.
Yeah.
For so long. So this is just Elzar and Yoda scene here, and we get Yoda's wisdom and love in full display in this conversation. Because I really like the way that he frames this conversation. So Elzar comes right out and is like, I had this conversation with Avar Kriss about love. What do you think about this? And is like super open with Yoda, which is good.
Which is what you have to be.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, that's just true in any relationship for anybody in the real world.
Well, we've seen so many times what not
true.
to do. Just last week,
right.
You got to tell people what's bothering you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so, you're exactly right. And so Yoda really puts it into perspective. And he remarks about how, true love is not attachment, not affection in the way that average people would think of it that way, but that you can have this kind of unlimited love that Avar is describing. And all this talk of choosing, Yoda's like, you have to choose every day to express this love and to, not fall to the dark side, basically. And this is how average everyday people experience love. Like, you have to choose your partner over yourself every single day in your own personal life. Like, you have decisions you want to make that are going to negatively affect someone in your life. And if you love them, despite your inclination or your urges or your thought or whatever you have personally, you make the decision that's better for them. And that's just what loving anybody is about. And so Yoda's explaining that.
And another thing that I took from this was like, the capacity for love is endless and boundless. And the easiest way, you can get really lost. There's entire books and philosophy behind this, but the easiest way I like to put this is like, you love your wife, and then you have a child, and now you love that child. Then you have another child, and you love that child. The love never diminishes. It's not like you have a pie and the slices are getting smaller with each child you have. Or each new family member that comes along in your life, it grows. And it's evident, and I hope more people get to experience that.
Yeah, no, it's important. You're absolutely right. This is just a good real world lesson. And that's usually why Yoda's so good. That's what his character exists for, is to impart actual real world lessons. The only note I have on this, and it's not even really a criticism, it's just me like putting the thought out there to ask our listeners what they think, and to say that I don't even really have a fully formed thought on this, was, does Yoda's definition of love right here mean that Anakin didn't truly love Padme? Because the way he's making it out to be is that the attachment kind of love is not true love. And so, Anakin fell to the dark side, and it was all selfish, and he ends up choking her in the end. So probably not is the answer, but it's just worth considering. Did Anakin, if the love was the reason that he fell to the dark side, these strong emotions, did Anakin ever truly love Padme? Did Anakin have the capacity to love?
Well, that one's tough.
Yeah, no, I don't have an answer. That's really just a question that came up that I've been thinking about since I read this chapter, and I haven't come to a conclusion. A conclusion I did come to, though, is that the love Yoda's describing basically one for one reflects Obi-Wan's love for Anakin. You were my brother, I loved you. The love that Yoda is describing is not just fraternal, it's not just brotherly love, but it is the capacity of love that Obi-Wan had for Anakin. Yeah. This not even acknowledged love, but this unspoken care that he had for him.
Right.
In the capacity of he was his brother. He was not his pupil. He was not his Padawan. He was his brother.
Right.
We also learned just a really important tidbit was that the first example of blight was Care Santeca's hand that was cut off. It was like, oh yeah, that definitely is true. Ding, ding, ding. And Elzar approaches Avon about loving her mother as like a totally manipulation tactic, basically. Now, it's out of a good place because it's a good lesson that everybody, she doesn't need to go on her whole life hating her mom. But they want something out of it. They want to use that. So we see what they want. Avon goes and meets her mom in her new embassy. And gives her some hardcore emotional manipulation here. She's like, leave the Nihil. And her mom's like, you don't understand. And her daughter's like, if you love me, you're going to tell us where Marchion Ro is, and then leaves. So real hardcore emotional manipulation, whether for good or for bad. And then Gira kind of turns and begins typing in some data, which, she's going to give up his location. Care helps identify a pattern for the blight based off of his hand. We then learn that Burryaga's push against the blight was successful, but marginally. Like, he was able to push against it with the Force and keep it at bay in a little semicircle, but that it took a ton of effort out of him to do that. We then cut to chapter 51. Porter has found Vise without any trace of nameless protection. That fits her MO already. He starts chucking bombs with the Force into their fort. Super cool. He's just like lobbing them super far distances. And then he enters. And he gets shot at by the Nihil, is just defending it easily, and then Vise comes out and challenges him yet again in her arrogance in the middle of this fort.
Yeah.
And so it was super cool. Yeah. Porter's little side plot has just been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We learned that Avon Staros did get that information from Gira. She gives the data stick to Elzar. And then a large team of Jedi is assembled. Burryaga, Bell, Avar, Elzar, Padawan named Amadeo, and Miro Lux.
Vernestra.
And Vernestra. And they are all headed to where they expect Ro to go next, to a new blight location. And there's lots of mystery surrounding the blight, as there has been this whole book, because it has a unique connection to the Force. And it has a way that it affects the Drengir, and a way that it affects the Nameless in different ways. And those two entities have a unique connection with the Force. So there's a lot of, relationships and webs here of how the Force works. None of them are Force breaking. They all line up totally with George Lucas's understanding of the Force. And they're all really interesting, unique ways to frame it.
Yep.
And so the Force wants Avar and Elzar together is the conclusion that Avar and Elzar have come to. And this is obviously a little explored concept. And then they enter the bone zone. They definitely do the deed. It is really not even that
pretty
subtle.
Overt.
Yeah, it's like they're in their clothes, and then obviously it's not going to go into detail because this is a Star Wars book open for teenagers to read. But the book name makes total sense when you read chapter 53.
It caught me totally off guard. I figured they'd just be like, we're just going to be together. Celibate people that never separate. But this was like, I don't know. It's not something bad that happened per se, but it's like, I guess we're going to see how this develops.
I could have done without it. I mean, it's not even a criticism. I get where it's coming from. It's fine. It has a place. This has been established in prior canon that Jedi do this. Sometimes. Very rarely, but it happens. But I could have done without it. I think my experience would have been slightly improved having not had that happen.
Yeah.
So we come back to Porter and Visa's fight, and Porter has some anger here. He's not letting it take him. He's not falling to the dark side, but we know that he has anger, but he's not using it. What he's really using is his sense of justice here, that Vis needs to come to justice. And that's an important part of Porter's character, is he's experiencing these negative emotions like anybody, like any Jedi, but he's been around for 150 years. He knows how to handle his emotions, and he knows what it means to be a good Jedi. And so those emotions come and then wash off him, and he's actually there for the justice. And this is the culmination of the Blade of Bardota story right here. But Vis runs again when she realizes she can't win. And this time, she doesn't run for any reason other than she can't win. Like, Porter has beaten her. And so she's gonna die. And so she runs as a coward here. Not out of, on Naboo. On Naboo is self-preservation. There's 4 people. I mean, she's not a fool. I mean, she is a fool, but she's not that big of a fool. And this is just another Skeletor moment where she gets away. This one is even a little bit crazier because she's getting away on a ship. Porter throws his lightsaber at the ship. Again, this guy's just so cool. He throws his lightsaber at her ship, buries it into the engine, and is, going to move it around, I guess, and then she's going to crash. And she gets on a comm and communicates to him that she knows where his sister is. She says this out of fear because she knows she's about to die. And so this catches Porter so off guard, he's shocked, he deignites the lightsaber, and then the ship gets away. Leaving us, just ready for the 3rd book. For this alone, I want to see this come to a culmination. Yeah, Skeletor, big time.
Parallel there.
Yeah. So chapter 55, Ro is on Vixoseph. This is the culmination. This is the climax of the book. We learn that the Rod of Power is what's protecting him from the Blight. The same thing he controls the Nameless with protects him from the Blight. So these 2 things are connected somehow. Ro is even able to hold the Blight in his hands. And so he wants to see if he can infect the Drengir hive mind with it, which is, again, he's just like running these demented experiments, but they are experiments. He's using the scientific method over and over. It's like, now what's going to happen? Now what's going to happen? Because he already at one point, I think we missed this, but on a different planet, he picks up the dirt and seeds it in a different part of the ground. And he's able to withstand it because of the Rod of Power, and he's able to put it down and it starts spreading in other places. Actually, that happens in this chapter. That definitely happens in this chapter. So in chapter 56, the Gaze Electric leaves the system just as the Jedi team arrives, which, as we're reading this, is supposed to make us think Ro just left. But then they find a Nameless on the planet on Vixoseph. And so this starts to cause the Jedi some anxiety. And then the ghost of Marta Ro begins to urge Marchion to let the Levelers loose to feast on the Jedi. But then he leaves instead. So they're all on the planet. Marchion's still on the planet, and he goes a different direction. So Vernestra comments about not having to grow up during the Nihil time. Her formative years are spent with this Nihil conflict. And so I'm saying that maybe part of her jaded appearance in the Acolyte we're going to get in this next book. Something even worse happens to Vernestra.
Kind of.
I think we have to.
Into that now.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to have to get something that scars her pretty bad. So we also see that Burry is struggling immensely with the Nameless. He can't hold it together. And he sees a vision of a cackling eye.
Yeah, that's creepy.
It was creepy. So Ro's still on planet, commands his leveler to bring him a Drengir. I'm almost questioning how that's going to happen, because it's just going to husk the Drengir. I was like, how's this thing that can't touch a Force entity going to bring you a Force entity that's still alive? So we keep going through. Avar, Buryaga, Elzar have engaged the Nameless. Avar has hallucinating Drengir influence on her because of the Nameless. These 3 attempt to stop the Nameless through their collective fear. And this is where we get to stop the Nameless. This is how we understand how Buryaga did it. So Vernestra's in pursuit of the Drengir. She's on a collision course for Ro, because Ro wants that one Drengir. Vernestra's headed that way. And then the Gaze Electric comes in, starts firing at the RDC. All the heroes are kind of against the wall. And Vernestra is bested by Ro with a lightsaber. They clash. Ro gets the better of her. because there's a leveler nearby. And then she sees the Drengir experiencing the fear of the Nameless, because there's a Drengir that's in the mouth of the Nameless, or that's grappling with the Nameless, and then there's another Drengir just petrified through the same kind of fear. And then, so the Drengir kills the Nameless. He's just able to kill it because Ro's making the Nameless hold back. And then Ro, as the Drengir's running away, and I don't know how you imagine these little guys. I've seen their pictures on screen, but I imagine like a bush, like an actual just like holly bush that's like knee high, without actual legs. And this thing's just like running away, waddling away, because it says it's running. And I'm just like, I think it's just like a bush that hops back and forth. And so it was a pretty funny picture, because then it's running away and it turns, and then Ro throws basically a pebble at it and hits it, and it turns around and looks at him. And we learned that it was blight that he threw at it. And then now this Drengir is blighted, so Ro's going to see what happened. And it was just, it's not meant to be funny, and it's not even really funny when you read it, but looking back on it, it's just really funny. He just like pegs this thing with a rock, and the way I imagine it is it's like little knee-high creature.
That's funny.
So anyway, we keep going, and Avar and Buryaga absorb Elzar's fear. The three are huddled together, and this allows him to see the Nameless. And Buryaga is super empathic. Avar has this deep connection with Elzar, and so the two of them combined are able to get the fear away from Elzar long enough where he can visibly see this. Ro gets away on the Gaze Electric. He runs off into the Blight. No one can pursue him into the Blight. Obviously, if Vernestra runs after him, she's just going to die. And so then the Gaze Electric comes and picks him up. And we cut back to the trio of Jedi fighting the Nameless, and exhausted, they are able to finally kill the Leveler. It leaps at them. Elzar strikes its side, and then its tail whips Avar and, draws blood, hurts her really badly. She took the strike, and then Elzar had clarity enough to kill it, through their connection together of Avar and Buryaga absorbing his fear.
This was such a fun climax for the whole thing. All these characters coming together, having an actual combat situation with Marchion Ro, the Leveler being bested. Up to this point, I'm like, how in the world are they going to... It just feels like you find one of these... A Jedi comes across one of these things, they're dead. And it would be an anticlimactic thing for the RDC to just be like, Nameless murked.
Right,
oh, well,
right.
Well, everything's good. And so it's really cool to see these Jedi through this triad of Buryaga, Shepard in it. And then the thing we've kind of been building to is this, it makes me wonder if Elzar and Avar didn't couple together like that, would they have been able to figure this out?
Yeah, really. No, that's interesting. That is an interesting thought. And yeah, it's important. It let their relationship culminate to this point. It gave us their relationship is why this was successful.
Yep. And it's interesting. This is the end of the Nameless. This is the end of the Leveler. There's this Blight is the new enemy now.
Yeah, we know how to fight the Nameless now. There's a bigger problem now.
If there's any hint of a Nameless anywhere, we got the Nameless Busters.
Yeah.
Buryaga, Bell as support, and Avar and Elzar are going to go knock them out.
Yep, exactly. So we then see Ro is on his way to Coruscant to deliver a message. And this is like super foreboding. This is the last couple chapters, like the last 15 minutes of the book if you're listening to it. And there's just like one, I'm like, are they going to save it for the next book? Two, if they don't, bad feeling in my stomach. It's like only terrible thing can come from this. And you kind of know what's coming, but the way they describe it is really cool. We learned that Gira receives this call while she's like out publicly, like trying to flaunt the fact that she's a Nihil just out on Coruscant. Finally, Buryaga is able to put to words the way he's been feeling about the Blight, and he says that the Blight feels homesick, which is a clue for us. I mean, that's really the only reason that chapter even exists, is for us to be contemplating what that could mean, how they're going to return the Blight to its home. So Marchion comes and lands on Coruscant, meets with Lena So, Elzar, Avar, Yoda, and two other Jedi who they're on the council. I don't really think their names matter. I don't even remember their names. Anyways, the levelers are coming down the ramp, and So demands he not bring them. That makes total sense. So he leaves them on the ship. Ro marches onto the landing platform wearing a bandolier of lightsabers once he's captured.
Hardcore.
It's like General Grievous, but amped up. Like, it's just, everything Ro does is so raw. He's so cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, he comes out and says that he wants to work, or not work together, but that he wants to find a solution to this blight problem affecting the Occlusion Zone and the Republic, and that he's the only hope. That he says, I know how to defeat it, which we don't know how he knows how, because we know that he can not be affected by the Rod of Power, but it's not like he can replicate the Rod of Power. And so he says he knows how to solve it, and then he drops blight-laden flowers onto Coruscant, and they dust into the wind. And so he's just blighted Coruscant, and then he says, and now I'm your only hope. And that's how the book ends. And it was really good, man.
Yeah. And you're just sitting there stunned. You read that, it's like flipping the pages or anything else.
Right.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
So the next one's going to be good. You know, I hope they turn into something impactful, because, like, it seems to me like the easiest solution is...
Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
We've got an Always in Motion segment to talk about what you think's going to happen. So any thoughts on this book? Any wrap-up thoughts on this book? It's not, I will say right out the gate, not as strong as The Eye of Darkness. Yeah, not weak, but The Eye of Darkness is
wasn't
better.
The thing is like, I kind of feel, and this might be, I might be crossing the line just then, I kind of feel like we're living in a soap opera with all these characters, where the story's just never going to end.
Mm-hmm.
And like, we know it has to. Time isn't infinite in this universe. But like, Marchion just keeps getting away with this.
Right.
You know, he needs to face his judgment or something. And you know, the good guys like Porter Engle, he spent his whole time in this on a jaunt, kinda. That's not the right word, but he has a noble journey, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
it's a much more personal story. And as we said at the beginning, you got to read that Blade comic to really get it.
Yeah.
Like, I think if I hadn't read that, I'd not be that into Porter's story.
But like, Vise didn't die at the end.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she got away one more time. And so it's like, are we going to get the next book? Or are we going to get a whole book of Porter Engle bouncing like a pinball around the galaxy, trying to solve this problem and find out where his sister is? It's like, or is the end of the book, well, I know where your sister's stepbrother is. Oh,
mm-hmm.
Man, come
mm-hmm.
on. I know I'm being facetious a little bit, but it's, you know, it's not that I want the story, just I don't want the next book. I do enjoy the story, but there's I don't know. It just feels like a soap opera to me.
Sure.
The
No, I
bad
understand.
guys always get away.
I think it's by virtue a little bit of the fact that it's such a long project, right? Like, this is the 5th book with these characters, the 7th book in the series. I don't think you've read these 2 series, but there's the Fate of the Jedi series, and then I can't remember the other one, but they both take place around the time the sequels take place in the old expanded universe, and both of those were 9-book series.
Yeah.
And they were all the same characters. They're all Jason and Jaina Solo, and then Grandmaster Luke Skywalker and Ben Skywalker. And so it's like, you feel that way too a little bit in those, because it's like, how do they keep just coming up with curveballs to throw these folks? Yeah. And it's all good. It all comes to a head, and I think that's how we'll feel after the end one. But yes, when you're on the 7th and 8th book for those series, you're like, what are we doing here? Like, this has got to, because in the virtue of them being 9-book series and this being a 7-book series is that you feel like the entire third half is all climax. It's all this giant buildup, and it's like, come on. Like, it's just, wait.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, obviously I want to give it, I love reading these books. I'm invested in what happens to these characters. I hope it also seems like there's a lot of characters in this. Like Bell and Buryaga, and I'm fine with it. Buryaga got more of a spotlight than Bell did in this one.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And that's fine. Because before it was Bell Zettifar who got more of a spotlight than Burry did. So I'm kind of glad about that, but I like Bell more.
Sure.
And I want to see him do cool things. They're running out of bad guys again. I guess that's a good contrast. The good guys always stay the same. Marchion Ro always stays the same. Mm. But like in the first books, it was the Tempest Runners and them doing
Lorna D and Pan Ada.
Yeah. And now we got Phase 2 and it's different, and that's fine. It's a different story. But now we only had that one doctor, the mad doctor at the start.
Bulin, yeah.
Bulin, yeah. And the Tempest Runners aren't even mentioned. I
know. Well, not all of them. We don't. Lorna D is alive. Okay. I mean, they confirmed alive. And I don't know. So far for Phase 3, I've only read the adult novels. I don't know if she's cropping up in the comics or in the young adult novels, but she is alive. And I was kind of surprised that she doesn't show up at all in this book somehow.
Yeah. And then, what's her first name? Staros, the wannabe Nihil senator. Gia or something like that. Gira. Yeah. Okay. You know, she's a good character. In the past books, she was written better than this one. And I feel like, you know, she was just like, she was more self-actualized in the previous book she was in. And this one, she's just like being pushed around.
Sure.
And I don't know if that's a criticism per se. She's kind of like dug her own grave. But that's more to the overarching point I just made of, I'm kind of used to the Nihil being this evil organization and doing horrible things. And it was just Vise being chased around, Marchand being a depressed weenie until the end, and this horrible thing happens. And I will say, you changed my mind on this. I didn't get their full perspective about Marchion Rowe, and so now that you've informed me, it's a lot better. But the Blight is going to be a fun thing to deal with.
Yeah, the Blight is definitely, I think, going to be fun. And it's, you know, just you think about the ramifications of the Blight on Coruscant, it's a genocide of trillions is what it is. Yeah. You can't evacuate Coruscant. That's not a concept. That's not possible.
Yeah.
And so that part's super interesting. But I think your criticism of Vise is right. But I think that where that comes from is the Occlusion Zone's falling apart, and it's falling apart because Rowe has not been there to lead it. I mean, Staros and Vise, he has them infighting against each other. It's the Emperor Sith philosophy a little bit right there, with he wants them constantly at each other's throats. But it's not even the Emperor's is so their strongest rise to the top. Rose is, he could care less what happens with these people. He just does not have a smart structure in place.
He doesn't care about power. He cares about destruction.
Yes, exactly. I just echo most of your thoughts. I enjoyed the book. It's not as strong as The Eye of Darkness, and it's not as strong as most of, actually, any of the other adult novels. Maybe the weakest of them all, which is, I still enjoyed it. So kind of a testament to the fact that these are all pretty dang good.
Yeah.
But man, I'm sure that people can hear my dog and our front doorbell ringing, and just it's destruction in this household in the background right now.
Marchion Rowe walking.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, I think that these books are reinforced in their quality by the fact that this may be my least favorite, and I still liked it quite a bit.
Like, I guess if I had to rate it, it's still a 7, whereas the others are 8s and 9s.
Yes, know? Yeah, I'm right
That's
there.
Still
with
real
you.
high. It's not a 6.
Yeah, well, we've said as much on this podcast. We've read a couple stinkers from Star Wars Publishing before, and so
they're obviously stinkers. I mean, it's overt. They're 3s and 4s.
Yes,
it's that big of a gap difference.
But this one is still, it's still great, still good. I didn't feel like I wasted my time reading it at all.
I still love being with all the characters. Porter Engle is just so cool. This Avar and Elzar, it's hard to say that repeatedly.
Right.
It's seeing them grow is cool. Maybe not the direction I'd put it per se, but I'm not a writer, and who knows how that's going to go.
Sure.
But that Yoda put a context on it that I hadn't considered. You know, it's something that's built there. That's a fun thing to explore, I think.
Yep, I agree. I totally agree. So that wraps up our thoughts on this book, but let's head over to our Always in Motion segment, where we're going to talk about the culmination of the High Republic multimedia project coming next year.
Difficult to see. Always in motion is the future.
All right, there's some more wisdom from Yoda right there, as he tells us that the future is difficult to see. For us non-Force users, it's impossible to see, but we're going to try. We're going to try to give you guys what we think is coming in the next book. Few predictions right out the gate for me. So I think a big portion, not of the book, but of a plot point we're going to have, is that there's a bunch of Jedi stuck on Coruscant, just making sure the Blight doesn't progress, using Buryaga's method, just basically around a circle of Blight this whole time, exhausting Jedi, and you have to fill in with people all the time. It's like, it's time for your shift at the Blight stopping factory, like just over and over and over. I think that'll be a central part of it. obviously, we're going to get Porter reunited with his sister, culmination of that story. And then, and it's obviously the end of the story, but I think that characters got to die. Multiple characters got to die, I think. Between Avar and Elzar, Avar dies, is my guess.
Oh, man. I hope not. I like her a lot.
Yeah, I do too.
You echoed a lot what I was going to say. I was going to make some joke about, 1,000 Jedi days sacrificed to the Astronomicon or the blood of the whatever. That's a 40K thing. But yeah, it's exactly going to happen like that. And it's going to be, Burryaga's going to save the day.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to, he gave all the insights, homesick, yada, yada, yada. And then, but there's more to it than that. It's like, where did the blight come from? I think that has something to do with the nameless being spread about. They're not supposed to exist. In one of the previous books, there was this perilous journey to get the eggs, right? And the eggs were alluded to in this book earlier, but nothing was developed on that plot point at all. So something's going to happen hopefully happen with these eggs and Burryaga and researching this and that. And it feels to me like maybe once the nameless are thwarted wholly, this blight will be too somehow. Like it's some sort of yin yang, field of the fire, this and that, so that because I feel like these nameless aren't supposed to exist in the wider universe.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think they're not supposed to exist in the wider universe, just like the blight with the homesickness thing. Well, obviously, we have the teams of different Jedi. They're going to be doing different things. Porter is going after Beast. That's not even like a prediction. That's just is. Avar and Elzar will probably be the ones to confront Marchion in the end, I think, in an actual lightsaber fight. Burryaga and Bell, they are probably, like you said, going to solve the blight and the nameless issue. I think Vernestra will be key to liberating the Occlusion Zone, because that's like not a problem. That's the Occlusion Zone is still an issue. It still exists. Girastaros will be brought to justice somehow. She's already kind of telegraphed a little bit of her being a turncoat, and we don't get her reaction to Ro dropping this blight on the planet.
Yeah.
So she's just gonna be like incarcerated for the rest of her life.
Yeah. So the other thing is not only the end of Marchion Ro, but the end of the Nihil, right? Because they're not a thing, and they're just end up being a footnote,
right,
and everything. So that's going to be fun to see. One of the tricks of the trade of Marchion Ro is that he's this dirty fighter, and so every time the interaction he's had, if you ask me, the whole series up to whatever final confrontation has been kind of given hints of what it's going to be. It's going to be a very punishing fight for the Jedi when they finally stop him and put an end to his shenanigans.
Right. And, we know his self-destructing laboratory is going to have to come into play at some point. And the path key only carved on his body. So I think there might be some kind of ultimate destruction plan he's got with the Stormwall where, they're going to blow up and cause some level of destruction that's going to need to be stopped in the last moment. Something a lot of people echo that I'm just going to say I also hope for is I like the fact that the Sith have not been a part of this story. Totally acceptable. The Jedi have more conflicts than the Sith. But I hope the epilogue is whatever Sith Lord at this time, just not his thoughts, like it's, this is what I think about these events, but that we get some semblance of the epilogue of that whatever this Sith Lord was doing at the time, where now there's a little piece of the puzzle for the future rise of the Sith that was gleaned from this entire conflict.
Yeah. Like peeking into how the Nihil affected the universe and maybe utilizing some of their insights and how things worked or something like that. Sure.
Or maybe like the Nameless hampering him somehow, hampering the Sith Lord somehow, and him being glad that they're gone or whatever.
Right.
Something like that. So I've got a question for you about this. This is a little on the spot. So you don't need to have a concrete answer, because I don't have a concrete answer, and I've been thinking about this. But I'm going to read you. We talked about this on our last episode about the High Republic and the Eye of Darkness episode, but I'm going to refresh every listener's memory with it so we can talk about it. This is the Chosen One prophecy, so the prophecy about Anakin. Only through the sacrifice of many Jedi will the Order cleanse the sin done to the Nameless. The danger of the past is not past, but sleeps in an egg. When the egg cracks, it will threaten the galaxy entire. When the Force itself sickens, past and future must split and combine. A Chosen One shall come, born of no father, and through him will ultimate balance in the Force be restored?
Oh, I'd have to break that down. What's the question? I'm jumping.
So, well, the question is, does this play a factor in the last book? I mean, does not the prophecy, not that they're going to read it explicitly and be like, oh, but, it talks about the egg. It says the nameless specifically. It says, for the balance in the Force will be restored, which is presumably the Force becomes unbalanced through whatever happens to the nameless in the next book. So did the nameless exist as some Force balancing entity? The Force itself, sickness, seems to refer to the blight as this sickness. Right. There's just a lot going on in the prophecy where we have the puzzle pieces, but I don't see how they come together yet.
Read the part about the split.
Yeah, that's the most confusing part for me, is when the Force itself sickens, past and future must split and combine.
See, it's almost like maybe there's some sort of, and I have no basis for this, there's just some sort of intuitive thing that the light side just can't conquer this by itself. You're going to have some dark side influence to conquer this blight somehow.
So maybe the Drengir play a key role in conquering the blight.
Could be.
Yeah. I think that may be part of it.
And again, that's just some sort of intuitive thing about how it's split, different sides of the Force.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand how the past and the future work.
That's what I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's not time travel. I mean, we know that. I mean, time travel doesn't have much of a place in Star Wars for good reason.
But the dark side could be the past because it existed in much more essence in the past. Whereas to the Jedi in this time period, the dark side is only the Drengir and whatever they brush up against. Right.
Well, and we know that from the past that there's been a little bit of a cover-up between the Phase 2 and Phase 1, and that there's we went to the past with Phase 2, and we got to see past events. And so something from there, who didn't come up, Dark Side user, didn't come up except a passing mention in this book, was Aslan Rel, who was the cliffhanger of Book 1, and how Elzar Mann is so similar to him from his perspective. Yeah. So something Aslan Rel may come.
We got, like I said, mentioned the eggs. There's the hive mind at the bottom of Iram, which Aslan Rel was all intertwined with. I bet he's going to be in one of these books that has something to do with this.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's going to play a big part.
I think we've Sherlock Holmes this thing.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see. We'll see in a few months if we're right or not. But it's just, that is important that the prophecy obviously has something to do with this.
Yeah, there's too many coincidences.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They know what they're doing. They're written by the same company. So it's a couple of years apart. So the seeds were planted. It was honestly, so we know this also to be true. That prophecy comes from the Master and Apprentice book, which is the book about Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. And when that was finishing being written was when they were having the first initial meetings about the High Republic Initiative. Yeah. So that was their chance to plant a seed.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Yep. I can't wait.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fun because that's a fun prophecy, and now it gives a lot of weight to the High Republic events, and that it connects to the Chosen One prophecy. Like it makes it not just a footnote in history for the reader, at least.
Right.
So anyway, that's exciting. Good Always in Motion segment. We've got a lot more show left for you, so now we're going to head on over to our Patreon-powered segment, the How the Force Works segment.
That's not how the Force works.
All right, so for you listeners who may be new, this is our Patreon-powered segment where Patreon subscriber asks us a question, we answer it live on the show. This perk starts at $1. So head on over to patreon.com/Star Wars Station and check out our Patreon, check out all the cool offerings, and for $1 a month, you can ask us cool questions here on this podcast. This one comes from Patreon subscriber Brian, and he asks, with the reception of The Acolyte, Disney announced Season 2 is canceled. The director is trying to get it reinstated for 2026. Do you think this series should be greenlit for a second season? So, Brian, to condense your question a little bit, so I looked and dug around. Season 2 has not been canceled yet. There's no news if it's been canceled or otherwise. It is in limbo right now, though. So really, the question is do we think we should get a second season? We talked a little bit about this last week in our wrap-up of The Acolyte, but it's worth revisiting again. Do you think that there should be a second season of The Acolyte?
I guess that came on the heels of fresh off of that show. We've had a week to think about it since then, and I'm so torn on this. I know where I'm going to land, but from certain perspectives, the first seasons of a TV show are some of the worst. Almost every TV show universally. And the actors grow into their roles. The production folks grow into the story they want to tell. A lot of, and these are such, it's not some comedy skit riffing jokes at a bar or with your friends sitting on a couch talking about highly improbable situations and your prerequisites. You have to be stupid for any of this stuff to work, right? All these characters are portrayed as like ultra vigilant, ultra smart, and still have flaws and all this other stuff. So I do really think there's room to grow here. The flip side of the coin, though, is this TV show cost almost $200 million. And we don't have enough insight into how much these ratings matter, how much the money, their return on investment matters. There's so much in play here that we don't have can't even hold a candle to on this just for lack of knowledge.
Right.
So, it's such a delicate thing because part of me wants to say it's easy to fall into some bomb thrower traps of like, these people are doing things wrong to the property, and if you were to bull everything down, to me, it kind of, if I see a person on the street, I want them to answer in regards to the show 2 questions. Do you feel like this was a positive addition to the Star Wars storytelling franchise? If it's yes, then you make another season 2. And the second one is kind of boils that down even further is, would you recommend your friends to watch this show? And like to my friends, I tell them, because I've seen the whole thing and they know how much they know about the podcast, this and that. I'm like, this thing moves kind of slow. You need to binge it all in one setting. And you can decide pretty fast if you want to continue watching this or not, because it takes a long time to get to where it wants to go.
Yeah, it's slow burn for sure. I'd say the binging that's good advice for sure.
So, I know I felt better but we'd have had, like, this should be good as 2 movies, 3 movies. But I mean, cause we're talking about the similar budget of these things,
Right.
But even then I would have liked to, splitting hairs a little bit. If you did 2 or 3 movies, you could have doubled the money on this thing and really had some really, the sets look good in a sense, but they seem really compact at the same time. I know I'm all over the place here. I'd say if you can answer those questions in a positive way, then yes. If you can't, then it's a no. And for me, gosh, hold a gun to my head. I'd say, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So for me, it's different than what we talked about last week, because last week was the Always in Motion segment, and it's predicting the future. It's will there be a season 2? This is should there be a season 2, which for me honestly does make a different answer. Actually, no, I think actually my answer is the same, but for different reasons. Because my whole point about there's not going to be a season 2 last week is because it all boils down to money, and they're just going to make a decision on money, and I don't think that the money was there on this. But now, if it's a should thing, I would just like to see the money go other directions, because I want to see Luke Skywalker's time at the Jedi Temple. And I think that they told a good enough story that doesn't have to have a season 2, that it's time that we can move the money to different places to do different things. I mean, I still want to see what happens after the sequels. I'm excited for Rey's new Jedi Order movie. And so whether there's a budget to be dispersed among other things or create a new TV show, I have interests in other time periods, interests in other stories that I think should is probably a no. I think the first season told the story it wanted to tell. My predictions for the second season are going to be that there's a lot of rehashing. And so I think that if there's a season 2, I'm not going to be upset. I mean, I'm still going to watch it. We're still going to talk about it on this show. But I think that if I were Bob Iger, I'd allocate the money somewhere else.
Yep.
So thank you, Brian, very much for your question. We appreciate it. And if anyone wants to ask a question, like I said, all you have to do is head on over to patreon.com/Star Wars Station and ask it over there. We've now got a news segment to hop into. This week was San Diego Comic-Con, so we've got a little bit of news coming out of there. So let's hop on over to the HoloNet news.
You made the HoloNet.
All right, Colin, 3 news stories today, one of which we're gonna kind of combine because we got some information and then we got some new information. So the first news story, it came out just a couple days ago, that Marvel has confirmed Star Wars comics set between episode 5 and 6 and the Vader series, they're done. We're getting a new series. When comics got revived when Star Wars comics didn't get revived, they were still being printed by Dark Horse. But when Disney bought the company, switched the publisher to Marvel away from Dark Horse, Star Wars comics did this thing where the series just titled Star Wars was set between episode 4 and 5. They ran and told that story for a long time. Then they stopped there, and then they did a comic series between 5 and 6. There's like a ton of major plot lines, but in that time period, it's a little much. Now that's finally ended, and they're just going to They're going to resume and do it right after Return of the Jedi, which who knows how long that can run. I mean, that's like in perpetuity almost. We'll get 30 years worth of comics between now and The Force Awakens.
See what happens on Exegol.
Yeah. And we're also no longer getting the Vader series, which this is the 3rd or 4th Vader series. I think it's the 3rd. Yeah. This is the 3rd ongoing
so many
Vader
stories
series.
You can tell about that guy.
Yeah. Well, what's that line that the writer had about it?
Oh, I forget. Something like you get tired of riding a badass doing badass things all the time.
Right. Exactly. And then we have an update a little bit to the story that came from San Diego Comic-Con yesterday. And this update is that the stories will specifically, for the Star Wars series, focus on the Battle of Jakku, and it's going to be a trilogy of comics, which I don't know what that means. A trilogy of comics, like how many are going to be in each, but there's going to be 3 limited series focused around the Battle of Jakku specifically.
Yeah, I saw something about somebody else talking about this. There's going to be like a new Inquisitor in this. All kinds of cool stuff. That
is cool. That's an Inquisitor operating without the Emperor and Vader was going to be pretty interesting, I think. And it'll be, the Battle of Jakku has not been in the spotlight for a while. When Disney had just bought Star Wars and they were doing all of their multimedia, and the Battle of Jakku was a first concept and the Battlefront video game was coming out, it was like Battle of Jakku overload. I mean, that was you had the Aftermath trilogy, the Shattered Empire storyline. Like, there's just all kinds of post-ROTJ stuff, and they let that cool off for a while. And so I think they've let it cool off enough that I am ready to head back to Jakku and really get more perspectives on that battle, because it's not like everything is told there. We don't even really have Han, Leia, or Luke's perspective on the battle.
Yeah, this is what we're getting. Luke's prominently featured in all these covers. So Leia and Han, everybody too. And the bad guys are totally different. They look really cool.
Yeah, cool. I'm excited about that. And finally, our last news story for the week is that the Mandalorian and Grogu set photos have confirmed a return to Navarro.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to start there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's where it ended. That's where they have their little house. But I want to know just how much time has passed. Like, we saw, if Jon Favreau's to be believed, which I don't think he is, I think this was just an unreliable interview where he says 2 years passed. Navarro thrived in those 2 years. Yeah. It's going to be Coruscant when we check in on this movie.
Well, trade hubs make a big deal. That's what, what's his name? The mayor talked about. The actor who died.
Yeah, Carl Weathers, Grief Karga.
Grief Karga. That's what he talked about, is that since the pirates are chased away, or the Empire was chased away, they're in the middle of a trade route, and it's a big deal now.
Right. Well, and your mention of him is going to be pretty interesting insofar as how are they going to handle Carl Weathers passing away. It may give us a little bit of an insight on how they're going to handle Ray Stevenson passing away. Maybe not guaranteed, but it'll be interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, and Carl Weathers, man, he is a great actor. I loved him and so all his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sad to see that he's not going to be in this. And I'm going to be sad if he's just like, oh yeah, Grief, he passed away. He's off on a mission or something like that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's got to be something like that. But maybe they start at his funeral or something. that'd be really cool.
That would be good. Maybe the villains killed him or something, some kind of conflict happened.
Gave his, the character made a whole 180 in the show.
Yeah, 100%.
He was a bounty hunter guild honcho, and then he's the mayor of the town, of the up and coming town. They'll name a school after him. They'll name a street after him.
Yeah,
and it's going to be cool.
He might get one of those statues that IG-88 had. So I totally agree. I'm excited to return to Navarro. I'm excited for the Mandalorian and Grogu. That's coming up soon. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So that wraps up our news segment. We've got one more segment to get into, and so let's head on over to our Star Wars moment of the week.
We would be honored if you would join us.
All right, Colin, what is your Star Wars moment of the week?
Mine's pretty fun. My kids went to baking class, like a kids-oriented baking class that the college put on. And my daughter made cookies and put some Star Wars stuff on them, just Star Wars and little this, little that. It's pretty cute. And so presented me with the cookies at the end of the day. It's fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super cool. What were they like as far as what they look like?
Star Wars and just little blobs. It didn't look like anything.
Oh, I understand. I got you. I didn't know if they were like Yoda cutouts or okay.
But yeah, some green stuff said that was Yoda, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
There's circles with icing on them is what it is.
I understand now. Yeah. Well, I thought that there was like a Yoda cookie cutter or a Vader cookie cutter.
We have those. I need to bust those out.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's hard to tell. I mean, like a Yoda shape, there's subreddits where they talk about what shape is this. Right. Yoda shape's like, what is this thing? You'd have to know.
Things when cookies flatten and puff out, they get all big, and so
you got to decorate them. And a round one just as well will be shaped as a Yoda head one or Grogu head.
Sure, Death Star shaped cookie.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, cool. So mine's a little bit small, but I'm excited about it nonetheless. We have coming up out of my new 3D printer a Millennium Falcon dice tray that we're going to be
using.
Looking
forward to this.
Yeah.
I think you told me about that.
I'm pumped. We're going to be using it for the RPG that I already mentioned at the top of the show. So we filmed that RPG live. That's one of the bonuses of being on Patreon is at the $2 tier and above. You can see the actual play RPG and it's, video and fully produced with audio and sound effects. And so that's going to add to the flavor too, is we're going to have a little Millennium Falcon dice tray smack in the middle of the table. Yeah. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be cool. But that wraps up our program, and we appreciate everybody listening. We appreciate you hanging along with us as we talk Temptation of the Force. I hope you'll go and pick that up published by our friends at Random House Worlds. And so please go and take a look at it. It's a great book. Catch up on this series because it's coming to a head. It's coming to an end soon, and it's going to be a lot of fun next year. Yeah, we're going to be there. We're going to be covering it. We're going to be ready to roll for that. We got a lot of Star Wars podcast on the horizon. Outlaws is coming out in just a month and a week from today. So we're going to be able to talk about that. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. And we've got a lot of Star Wars coming up. We're slowly approaching our 100th episode. So we are going to be there to cover all of the Star Wars that you can imagine.
I have to break out the champagne. I've been doing this for 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. Yeah, absolutely. And so please continue to check us out. Continue to be on this Star Wars journey with us. We really appreciate your continued listenership. Head on over to patreon.com. We've mentioned it a few times, but that's because there's a lot of really cool stuff over there. You can find the Actual Play RPG podcast. You can find other exclusive podcast videos, t-shirts, stickers, ways to interact with the podcast, all kinds of stuff. You can find us on Twitter, SW_station, and you can find us on Instagram, StarWars.station. We've got a Discord at the link in this podcast bio. We've got a Facebook page, Star Wars Station. We've got a Facebook group, Star Wars Station Cantina. We've got a Twitch, twitch.tv/Station Media, that when Outlaws comes out, it's going to be kicking off with all kinds of Star Wars content.
On there.
Yeah.
Right now we're doing Warhammer stuff.
Yep.
I'm painting as many days as I can.
Lots and lots of 40K over there. Definitely check that out if you're a 40K fan.
The next thing on that big coming up is a local convention, Amicon.
Yeah, soon.
Streaming Warhammer.
Soon, yeah. In just 2 weeks, we'll be streaming some more Warhammer games there. So definitely check those out. And check out our website, StarWarsStationPodcast.com, where you can find t-shirts and stickers and all kinds of stuff. We appreciate you guys listening. We appreciate your continued support. And we appreciate you staying wizard.